It all begins with a dark energy surging from a rift in the mountains. This energy was coming from the Prota, who was trapped at the very bottom of the chasm. A mysterious figure asks how he is doing, addressing him as the young master of the Luoyang family. Realizing that he was completely immobilized, the young man cries out in agony while the terrifying voice mocks his suffering. He remembers the moment a cruel tormentor took his speech away with a pair of giant shears. Even without being able to speak, the entity claims it can perfectly hear the voice of his heart. Confused by what is happening, he wonders who could possibly own that mysterious voice. The prisoner despairs upon realizing he is blind, and the voice reminds him that his sight was taken away with hot iron. The voice continues the psychological torment, reminding him that his arms and fingers were also ruined. Not even his legs escaped the cruelty of the enemies who wanted to break him completely. His limbs were taken one by one as he repeatedly passed out from the excruciating pain. Little by little, he begins to recall the reasons that led him to end up in such a miserable state. The entity tells him he was far too busy being tormented to notice the passing of time. The young man asks what became of his family, and the voice merely laughs at his concern. To the young man's despair, the voice reveals that his entire family has been completely ruined. The entity commands him to try to remember everything he ended up losing along the way. A memory from the past shows his family mansion being completely burned down and leveled. The voice narrates the terrible price one pays when losing the people they love most in the world. The prisoner sees the image of a man violently striking another person who is down. On the ground, his older sister ended up being beaten and lost her life to her own husband to avoid trouble with the ruined family. The suffering also reached his second sister, who was a highly skilled swordswoman. Her power was stripped away, and she met a tragic end after being ambushed by cruel criminals. The young man cries out in despair, shouting that he knew nothing about it and that his family had great warriors to defend them. The dark entity questions whether he truly knew nothing about what was happening around him. The voice explains that after he left to marry into another family, a bloody conflict broke out among the relatives. They all fought and took each other out just to claim the vacant throne of the family patriarch in the past. The young man preferred to just read his books instead of caring about family disputes. The voice mocks him, saying he ignored reality just to flip through pages in his library. The young man insists he was just an ordinary guy, but the voice finds it amusing that he calls himself ordinary. The entity finds it extremely frustrating to see that he keeps trying to deny his own brilliance. A memory from his childhood shows the young man as a little boy next to his mother in a library. The voice reminds him that at just 4 years old, he was already helping organize hundreds of complex medical books. By age 5, he was already advising the emperor and saving thousands of peasants from starvation by predicting droughts. Given his potential, even the greatest strategists in history looked like total beginners next to him. The demonic face asks if he can finally remember who he truly is now. The young man admits to himself that the truth is he always knew absolutely everything that was going on. They reveal he was born under the influence of a sinister star that would bring conflict wherever he went. The creature laughs, saying his destiny has been fulfilled since everyone around him ended up gone. The young man realizes that, at the end of the day, he could never escape this absolute grim fate. With a bitter smile, he decides to let the rest unfold according to the very will of the heavens. He believes that the wicked will still be properly judged by the law of retribution established by the sky. A dark claw advances toward him, calling his beliefs completely foolish. The creature grabs his neck and questions why the heavens would care about such a weak human. The monster then decides to show him an ancient tale about the consequences of human actions. The narrative travels to a distant past where mystical creatures flew over the mountains. In that faraway era, there were people who sought enlightenment and believed in divine justice. However, even with this belief of the pure, cruel men kept committing endless atrocities. Those who did wrong lived surrounded by luxury and wealth before passing away peacefully in their beds. Meanwhile, the good-hearted people suffered from extreme exploitation and met a miserable end. The monster explains that at the end of the day, both the good and the bad just turn to dust all the same. Because of this, the voice questions how anyone still dares to believe in justice or reaping what they sow. The entity claims that behind all this false illusion of goodness, there is nothing real in the world. It says the only thing that truly rules the existence of everything is the relentless cruelty of nature. The young prisoner hears that a fair and divine judgment simply never truly existed. With a weary smile, the young man begins to laugh at the words about divine punishment and fate he just heard. He wonders if this whole idea of justice is nothing more than a lie created by those who have already lost all hope. It is at this exact moment that the great dark presence asks him directly if he wishes to obtain power. The prisoner immediately accepts, and the creature asks if he wants to change the past and save everyone with fierce determination in his heart. The young man answers once again that he does indeed want that opportunity. The monster questions if he would accept this, even if the price were the eternal suffering of his very soul. The young man reassures that he accepts any sacrifice and will seize this chance using everything he has available. He vows that he will be the one to rule everyone's destiny. While the creature celebrates his change of heart, the dark voice guarantees it will give him the power needed to change everything and restart his story. The prisoner feels the dark energy begin to wrap around his body as he smiles at the new chance. The monster commands him to finally open his eyes and look at the true power he is receiving. The heavy chains that had held him for so long finally begin to break and shatter onto the ground. He begins to walk as the voice explains that scripture was made from the skin of those who despised humans. The contents of that ancient book were entirely written with the lifeblood of someone who held a grudge against the heavens. The voice says the scripture was stitched with the sinews of those who hated the earth and that their paths are now one and the same. The entity holds out the macabre book and tells him to seal a contract to gain a new lease on life. The young man touches the mysterious scripture and accepts the pact, surrendering his soul to the darkness. A massive explosion of magical energy erupts around the young man as soon as the contract is sealed. The spirit reveals that the name of that legendary and forbidden book is the Scripture of the Dark Sovereign. That malevolent relic was created precisely to replace the flawed and indifferent justice of the heavens. The voice explains that this is a power that defies the heavens and serves to consume all the evil existing in the world. The scripture floats before him as the entity asks if he wants to judge and penalize all the wrongdoers. The creature promises that with his determination and the power of darkness, any goal will be possible from now on. The young man accepts his new role and is warned that from that moment on, he will live immersed in the deepest dark. Suddenly, the scene shifts, and we see a close-up of a blue eye glowing with immense life and clarity. He must now act in the shadows, as the dark sovereign tasked with punishing all the bad karma in the world. A giant beam of light falls from the sky directly onto the Wangak Pavilion, where the young master's residence is located. The wooden gates of the grand estate swing open, revealing a sunny inner courtyard. The young man appears lying comfortably in a clean bed, looking perfectly at peace. Suddenly, he opens his eyes wide, startled by what just happened. He sits up quickly in bed, completely shocked and breaking into a nervous sweat. The young man brings his hand to his mouth and lets out a sigh of relief upon realizing his speech is fully restored. He is very confused to notice that he has also recovered his sight and that there are no signs of torment on his body. Looking around, he realizes he is surrounded by books and expensive porcelain vases in a luxurious room. The young master recognizes that place immediately as his old bedroom in the Wangak Pavilion. He steps onto the wooden floor and begins to understand the meaning of having received a second chance at life. Looking at himself in a full-length mirror, he confirms that he really was sent back to the past. The young man realizes he has returned to when he was only 17 years old, well before all the tragedies began. At that moment, a servant knocks on the bedroom door, asking if the young master had coughed. He approaches the door and hears the staff whispering outside about the family's fate. The servants continue gossiping, saying he is pathetic and will probably spend the whole day locked up reading books. One of them comments that the young man's old reputation as a genius was nothing more than a silly rumor with no basis whatsoever. The young man is surprised that he can hear their conversation so clearly despite the room's soundproofing. He realizes that it wasn't just his hearing that changed drastically after this mysterious return. The young man looks at his hands and sees a strange, dark, and powerful energy pulsing beneath his skin. The young man realizes that his stamina, his physical strength, and all of his 5 senses have improved to an absurd degree. He wonders if all this overwhelming power truly comes from the legendary Jim Jincheon scripture. A mysterious purple aura begins to emanate fiercely around the young man's entire body. The young man notes that his current appearance, filled with intense intent and dark energy, looks just like a phantom. Knowing he can't go around looking like a monster, he tries to relax his face to look like a normal human. He flashes a sinister smile and begins to reflect on his current situation. The young man thinks that worrying about looking human is utter nonsense after everything he went through. He finally manages to recover his normal, pleasant appearance, feeling satisfied with the result. With everything ready, the young man decides that the time has finally come to start executing his plan. He takes his first steps barefoot toward the room's exit to face the new reality. The young man pushes open the large wooden doors of his room, revealing the bright daylight outside. Stepping out, he closes his eyes to appreciate the warmth of the sun bathing the grand mansion's courtyard. The staff who were cleaning the courtyard stop their work immediately upon seeing the young man step out of his room. The servants quickly bow and greet him respectfully, asking if he slept well. Ignoring the staff's questions, the young man keeps walking and enjoying the daylight. The employees begin whispering among themselves, finding it strange that the boss woke up so early that day. He looks at his hand, remembering the terrible cold he used to feel in the eternal darkness of his former prison. All that bad, icy sensation disappears completely as he feels the pleasant warmth of the sun. Satisfied with the day's warmth, the young master calls over one of the servants standing nearby. He orders authoritatively that the employee immediately gather all the servants who work under his command. The servant gets extremely frightened by the master's tone of voice and obeys, stammering out of fear. A short time later, a huge crowd of employees gathers in the courtyard to hear the young man's orders. The servants complain quietly about being called out so early and criticize the young master behind his back. They keep grumbling and think the young man is just trying to get attention because he is the heir. The young master walks calmly and asks if all the employees are already present at the location. He looks coldly at the group of servants, leaving everyone apprehensive about his behavior. Without beating around the bush, he announces that from that moment on, none of them will be needed at the Wangak Pavilion anymore. The heir orders everyone to report to the head butler's office immediately to receive new assignments. The employees panic and begin to shout, saying they cannot accept such a sudden dismissal. They protest furiously, stating they would be humiliated by the other staff and that they refuse to obey the order. The young man remembers how foolish he was in his past life for believing that treating people with kindness would bring respect. He used to think that his sincerity would one day reach their hearts, even if it took some time. With a slight smile on his face, he realizes that in reality, he just wanted to believe in a convenient lie. The servants are left confused and frightened as they see the young man begin to chuckle softly in the face of their protests. The young master's laughter grows louder and louder, echoing intimidatingly throughout the entire courtyard. He stops laughing suddenly and points directly at the leader of the servants with a serious gaze. The employee gulps and responds, stammering in pure terror at the master's sudden shift in attitude. The heir asks who he is, and the servant replies that he is Yeon So-hyun, the young master of the Loyang family. Yeon So-hyun questions if they think they are the true owners of the house to dare challenge his authority. The leader of the staff trembles in terror upon realizing that their complaints were interpreted as rebellion. The young master reminds him that the punishment for defying one's own master is usually extremely severe. He adds that the guilty party would lose at least a hand or a foot for the offense committed. Terrified by the threat of physical punishment, all the servants throw themselves to the ground, begging for clemency. The leader of the servants is completely drenched in a panic sweat as he realizes the gravity of the situation he got himself into. He cries, saying he has a wife and children who depend on his job to survive. The staff hit their heads against the ground, swearing they never had any intention of defying his orders. With a serene smile on his face, Yeon So-hyun makes a gesture for silence, placing his finger on his lips. Seeing them all humiliated on the ground, he wonders if controlling those people was really that simple. The young man smiles victoriously upon realizing he managed to easily eliminate the spies who were monitoring his steps. He walks past the servants, letting them know he won't punish them because the mistake was his for being too soft in the past. He coldly orders all the employees to pack their things immediately and leave his residence. Relieved not to be harmed, the leader of the servants bows all the way to the ground, thanking him immensely for his mercy. Yeon So-hyun tells him to inform the head butler's office about the mass layoff, but then decides to change his mind. He orders that the chief of butlers personally choose his next servant, and the employee promises to deliver the message. The staff flee the courtyard running in desperation, while the young master goes back to focusing on the sun's warmth. He looks at his own hand under the daylight and finds it extremely strange how strong the sun's heat feels. The young man reflects that despite feeling the heat, he cannot see the sun, questioning if the star has abandoned him. The scripture of the Dark Sovereign whispers that his destiny now is to punish evil by acting straight from the shadows. In another part of the family palace, one of the guards presents himself, saying he has an urgent report to deliver. The spy reveals to the chief of butlers that the young master has removed all the staff and watchmen from his residence. The guards bow before the leader, waiting for his orders to deal with the young heir's actions. Some mysterious and wicked figures in the shadows grow furious at the young man's sudden audacity. In the butler office of the Luoyang family, the leader realizes that the day he feared so much has finally arrived. The old chief reflects that he always knew something grand and drastic would eventually happen with the young master. He finds it intriguing that after 10 years of pure isolation, the young master has decided to expel all the servants. The butler recalls that he never forgot the day he saw the young man wield a sword for the first time in the courtyard. The young master displayed impressive dexterity, executing complex and swift movements with the blade. The old man and the guards who watched the scene in the past were completely shocked by his perfect stance. At that exact moment, the butler realized that the young man's presence and technique were already those of a true swordmaster. The chief understands that the period in which he could just safely watch the young man has officially come to an end. A young maid named Young-ah approaches his desk with great respect and greets him politely. The head butler asks the young woman to come closer because he has secret and very important instructions to pass on to her. The young maid agrees to the orders and walks calmly toward the desk of her respected superior. The old man confesses he has always liked her very much, which is why he was delaying an important mission that he now needs to carry out. He warns that the family's line of succession is about to change and that the young master will certainly be at the center of it all. The man asks her directly if she is ready to make her choice and go work at the young master's residence. Young-ah clenches her fists with determination and accepts the mission, guaranteeing she will obey all of her leader's orders. The old man praises the young woman's special eyes, which will help her uncover the young master's real, secret intentions. The maid begins to climb the massive stone staircase that leads directly to the imposing entrance of the new residence. She reaches the top and carefully observes the facade of the dwelling known as the Pavilion of Original Enlightenment. Young-ah is impressed by the colossal size of that palace, remembering the old butler's advice about power. One of the guards on duty notices the girl's presence, and she explains she was sent as the master's new maid. Upon focusing her special golden eyes on them, she gets irritated to see that the soldiers are nearly asleep on duty. She quickly notices that those are no ordinary soldiers, but rather highly training and very experienced warriors. The young woman formally introduces herself as the new personal maid of the estate, hired directly by the head butler. She holds out the official document with the butler's seal to prove she is there on legitimate official business. The lead guard lets out a lazy yawn and orders his companion to let the young woman pass without causing any trouble. Young-ah finds it odd that such strong warriors would let her in so easily and tells them to open the gate already. The two sentries push open the imposing wooden doors, allowing the palace's new maid to pass through. The young woman walks through the gates, maintaining her composure as she prepares for the challenges ahead. She begins walking along a path surrounded by a dense forest and illuminated by soft sunbeams. The guard who stayed behind flashes a sarcastic smile, commenting that he forgot to mention an important detail. Hearing the soldier's voice, the young woman looks back with suspicion, feeling that something very strange is about to happen. Suddenly, a loud sound echoes through the forest, and the path seems to mysteriously shift shapes right before her feet. Young-ah stops walking upon realizing that that path in the middle of the forest hides dangers she didn't expect. She analyzes the surrounding trees and notes that the woods were arranged in a complex and dense magical defense formation. The girl activates her rare golden eyes, knowing she would be lost in that magical labyrinth if she didn't have this power. She feels an overwhelming pressure coming from the forest's magical barrier that makes her feel as weak as a mere insect. The young master, who was watching everything from a distance, lets out an exclamation of surprise upon seeing the girl react to the barrier. He finds it intriguing that an apparently ordinary girl with no internal energy can perceive the location's magical barrier. Young-ah feels a sudden shiver and notices that there is someone silently approaching from behind her. She turns around quickly with a startled look to find out who is standing there watching her steps in the forest. From the midst of the mist emerges the imposing figure of the young master, walking calmly toward the girl. The young man stops in front of her and asks mysteriously how she is managing to perceive his presence. With an enigmatic smile on his lips, he comments that the new maid is truly a rather unusual girl. Young-ah is left completely paralyzed with terror, feeling an immense dark energy coming from the young master. Suddenly, her mind is transported to a terrifying dark illusion where she wonders where she is. In the middle of that total darkness, she spots a small and mysterious blue flame floating in the void. The flame transforms into a gigantic demonic eye that stares at her with a macabre and frightening smile. The young woman wakes up from her trance in desperation and realizes she is sinking in a dark and mysterious water. Several terrifying black hands begin to emerge from the water, trying to grab her and pull her to the bottom. Young-ah lets out a desperate cry as she is ruthlessly dragged into the darkness by the malevolent forces. The dark arms cover her mouth, preventing her from crying out for help as they sink her into the dark water. In her final moments of consciousness, she desperately begs in her thoughts for someone to save her. The girl reaches her weak hand out toward the surface, silently pleading for any kind of help. At the very last second, a strong and firm hand grips her fingers, rescuing her from that terrible illusionary nightmare. Yan So-yeon holds the passed-out maid in his arms, saving her life from the forest's dangerous magical formation. The heir observes her closely and thinks that the chief of butlers truly sent a rather interesting girl. Sometime later, Jung-ah wakes up, resting peacefully in a comfortable bed inside a well-lit room. She sits up quickly in bed, still a bit dazed, and wonders exactly where she ended up. The young woman examines the place and notes that the room is incredibly simple, yet has a very elegant decor. Upon getting out of bed, the maid ends up accidentally bumping into a stack of books that was organized on the floor. She picks up one of the open books and is surprised to see detailed illustrations of medicinal plants and anatomy. Curious, the young woman touches the book's page, trying to understand what kind of knowledge is stored there. With her golden eyes glowing, she carefully reads the contents of that mysterious work. The maid discovers that the book details medical secrets from various sects and breathing techniques for martial arts. Looking at the shelves, she wonders if all the books in that room hold such valuable secrets. Jung-ah is shocked to realize that books that should be in the imperial palace are stored in that very residence. While reflecting on her findings, she hears a noise and realizes someone is approaching the area. Paying close attention, she focuses her special eyes toward the door, waiting to see who is arriving. The young woman slides open the wooden door carefully and is greeted by a beautiful breeze filled with flower petals. She lets out a sigh of admiration upon encountering the stunning landscape of the palace's inner garden. Before her appears a beautiful, calm river passing under stone bridges, surrounded by vibrant nature. The maid is marveled because even though it is still winter outside, inside it feels like a pleasant spring. Yan So-yeon appears in the courtyard and asks if she slept well, inviting her to come down as soon as she is ready. Enchanted by the heir's kindness and good looks, she quickly answers yes with a flushed face. Later on, the young master calls her over to talk and asks if her name is truly Jung-ah. The maid politely confirms, and the young man comments playfully that she was quite heavy earlier. Jung-ah feels embarrassed by the comment and suddenly remembers that she ended up passing out in the middle of the forest. The young man asks if she doesn't remember falling into his arms, and the young woman quickly denies it, dying of embarrassment. He explains that he found her passed out during his walk and warns that she would be in trouble if he had taken any longer to arrive. Grateful, the girl bows deeply, swearing to serve the heir with all her loyalty and to give her life for him. He cuts her off, saying he didn't accept the proposal, and questions if the butler's written order is supposed to be an order for him. Yan So-yeon throws the butler's official letter onto the wooden floor, coldly ordering her to take the paper back. Jung-ah is completely shocked and frightened by the young master's cold and intimidating reaction. Desperate, she kneels down, begging for forgiveness and asking him to penalize her with the ultimate punishment for her great insolence. The young master finds the situation amusing, commenting that he just saved her life only for her to ask for the end now. She promises to do anything for him, and as he looks into her golden eyes, the young man recognizes her from his past life. He reflects on how bizarre their fate is for crossing paths again, even though they were never close before. The heir knows she will be a key piece in his future plans, under the title of the Golden-Eyed Witch. Yan So-hyun suddenly changes the subject and asks the young woman if she knows how to cook for him. The young man approaches intimidatingly and confirms that he wants to know if she is good in the kitchen. A short time later, the fire begins to burn intensely in the kitchen hearth of the grand residence. Jung-ah stands thoughtfully near the fire, regretting having caused trouble by passing out in the forest. She remains intrigued because she is absolutely certain she saw a strange, terrifying presence in the woods. The girl lets out a tired sigh, wondering if everything she experienced was just a silly nightmare. Jung-ah pats her own face to regain her focus and begin preparing the heir's feast. She begins chopping the ingredients. Impressed that the young man is so calm and steady despite people calling him weak, Yan So-hyun appears by surprise behind her, asking curiously if dinner will be meatballs. The maid turns around quickly, startled, and the young man jokes, saying that the menu is the most important thing at the moment. She agrees, embarrassed, and he lets her know he is very hungry. Asking her not to take too long to serve, Jung-ah promptly agrees, and goes back to cooking with great effort to impress her new master. The young woman serves a table full of wonderful dishes in no time, and the young master praises her work. The young man invites the maid to sit and eat with him, but she timidly declines, saying she prefers to eat later. With an extremely serious and authoritative expression on his face, the young heir orders her to sit down already. He coldly warns that he doesn't like to repeat himself, and the young woman obeys right away, sitting at the table out of fear. To her surprise, the young man picks up a piece of food with his chopsticks and offers it directly for her to taste. The young woman is left completely shocked and speechless by Yeon So-hyun's unexpected and bold kindness. He insists that she eat, and Jung-ah feels very awkward about feeding herself before her own master. With a firm and calm gaze, the young heir orders once again that she simply eat what he is offering. The girl finally accepts the food with flushed cheeks as she chews the delicious food. The heir asks if it tastes good, and she timidly agrees, making the atmosphere much more pleasant. Satisfied with the young woman's positive reaction, the young man decides to start eating the wonderful feast as well. He praises the food, saying the seasonings are perfectly balanced and that she cooks very well. The young master devours everything quickly and holds out his empty bowl, asking her to serve another plate. With a satisfied smile on his face, the young man praises the seasoning again and asks for another round of food. The night progresses, and the heir keeps asking for more and more bowls of food without stopping his meal. Jung-ah apologizes desperately, saying all the food has run out, and the young man decides it's best to stop there. The maid offers some tea to help with digestion, but the young master declines, saying he prefers to have some wine sitting on the roof under the full moon. He finds it strange to still be so hungry, and blames the power of the dark scripture. He wonders if the price for obtaining such a massive power that bends time would just be having an insatiable stomach. Suddenly, several dark hands emerge out of nowhere, covering the young man's face, and a sinister voice says, "It's not that simple." A demonic expression takes over the young man's face, while the shadows keep whispering in his ear. Yeon So-hyun is completely enveloped by a black and malevolent smoke under the bright light of the full moon. The young man's eyes turn entirely black as the terrifying influence of the darkness takes control. The evil spirit whispers right next to his ear, warning that the time to act has finally arrived. The dark force orders them to begin feasting, and the young master takes a powerful leap into the air. He sets off at high speed through the night, eager to begin his terrible and macabre feast of power. The scene shifts to a busy and noisy tavern located in the central region of the city of Luoyang. The owner of the place lets an important customer know that the tavern is full, but the man insists there is a free table. The employee tries to stop the customer from entering in a desperate manner, but the man keeps walking stubbornly. The man in blue clothes enters the venue, irritated but stops suddenly upon looking in the direction of the empty table. The customer's expression instantly changes to pure panic upon witnessing a bizarre scene. He sees sharp teeth violently chewing raw meat and bloody hands devouring the food. Yeon So-hyun is devouring raw meat directly with his hands. With a completely insane and terrifying look, the young man repeats non-stop that is still not enough to satisfy his insatiable hunger for power. The customer watches that grotesque scene, breaking into a cold sweat and paralyzed with terror at the young heir's madness. With his legs trembling out of fear, he stammers that the young man looks like a ravenous phantom that escaped from the underworld. The man runs out screaming in desperation, warning everyone that a terrible, ravenous demon has appeared in the tavern. Yeon So-hyun ignores the commotion and continues devouring the raw meat in a wild fashion, obsessed by the darkness. Suddenly, the young man stands up from the table abruptly, startling all the customers in the tavern. He recovers his calm and normal expression, wiping the remnants of the grotesque meal from his mouth. The young man walks slowly toward the tavern's exit, casting a massive shadow on the wall. The tavern's customers watch his walk, paralyzed with terror at the absolute bizarre sight they just witnessed. Yeon So-hyun stops in front of the establishment's manager and calmly asks what the total bill comes to. The manager trembles from head to toe and can barely form a coherent sentence in front of his terrifying presence. With a dark smile on his lips, he throws a pouch of money to the employee, guaranteeing that should be enough. The manager and the customers thank him fearfully while commenting quietly that the young man looks like a true phantom. Back on the roof under the moon, the young man complains about still being hungry even after devouring so much food at the tavern. He wonders if he really turned into a ravenous phantom of the underworld and if there would be anything capable of satisfying him. The young master tries to clear his thoughts, shaking his head to drive away those terrible hallucinations. At that exact moment, he catches a scent in the air and wonders where that specific and striking smell could be coming from. The young man smiles wickedly upon noticing that a delicious and tempting aroma is spreading across the surroundings. He gets extremely excited, feeling that he has finally found the perfect feast to satisfy his dark hunger. In a nearby alley, violent sounds of a beating and cries of pain echo through the quiet night of Luoyang. A merchant is slammed brutally against the wooden ground by a group of cruel tax collectors. The thugs from the Black Bone faction mock the injured man, asking if he thought he could steal from their boss. The bloody merchant crawls along the ground, outraged by the abusive interest charges of those wretched criminals. One of the thugs stomps hard on the victim's injured hand, demanding silence while the poor man screams in pain. The leader of the group orders them to stop the beating and tells them to grab the merchant's identification plaque lying on the ground. He bends down and picks up the wooden plaque, knowing that that item guarantees total control over the victim's life. The criminal laughs sadistically, saying that now he can sell the man's shop, wife, and children to pay off the debt. The merchant begs desperately for them to take him, instead of his beloved family, and accepts any punishment for it. The collectors keep kicking the man, saying his old body is worth nothing on the slave market. The leader begins making terrible plans for the children until he hears a bizarre whistling sound coming from the alley. The criminals immediately look around in anger, demanding to know who the insolent fool mocking them is. One of the thugs begins to feel an unbearable headache because of the sharp and piercing sound of the mysterious whistle. The leader orders everyone to be quiet to try and find out where that mind-disturbing sound is coming from. He realizes that only an incredible master would be capable of shaking someone's soul using nothing but the force of a whistle. The chief of the collectors makes a formal salutation, asking for the hidden master to reveal himself and state what he wants with them. The three criminals get into combat stances, waiting apprehensively for the mysterious opponent's appearance. The leader gulps, feeling a cold sweat run down his neck due to the immense magical pressure in the air. He insists on the respectful salutation, pleading for the master to do them the honor of showing himself before them. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the dark alley, announcing the arrival of the terrible threat. Yeon So-hyun emerges from the shadows, exalting a dense purple aura with his eyes glowing in an insane violet shade. The leader of the thugs takes a step back, terrified upon seeing the frightening and macabre smile stamped on the young man's face. The young man comments sadistically that he smelled a delicious scent coming from there and confirms he found his feast. The chief of the collectors panics upon realizing that the young master is actually the monster that haunts Luoyang. He tries to attack, shouting desperately for the monster to end, but the air moves fast and grabs his arm. Yeon So-hyun begins to crush his opponent's arm without the slightest effort, while the man screams in agony to stop. With a violent snap, the chief's arm is broken, spilling blood onto the ground and making him roar in extreme pain. The other two thugs watch the scene of torment, completely petrified with fear, not knowing how to react. The young heir holds the leader by the neck while the dark energy begins to drain all of the criminal's vitality. Yeon So-hyun gives a macabre and bloody smile, savoring the life energy he is absorbing from that wicked soul. He drops the dry and lifeless body of the criminal onto the stone ground while the smoke of darkness remains active. The shadows and souls of the underworld begin to emerge around the young man, celebrating the conclusion of the terrible ritual. The man's life energy is fully consumed by the darkness, feeding the young heir's ravenous magical power. The whirlpool of darkness enters entirely into Yeon So-hyun's chest, temporarily satisfying his internal void. The young man flashes a diabolical smile upon noticing that there are still two frightened collectors left in the dark alley. The two surviving thugs scream in terror, calling the heir a monster, and begin to flee desperately. The two thugs run desperately, trying to escape the terrifying presence chasing them in the dark alley. Suddenly, a dark and monstrous force emerges out of nowhere and brutally attacks one of the fugitives from behind. The other criminal is paralyzed with panic upon realizing his companion was caught with no chance of defense. A bloody hand slides slowly down the tiled wall, showing the cruelty of the terrible attack. The surviving bandit spits blood and trembles in terror, believing that all of this is nothing more than a terrible nightmare. The last thug decides to run desperately to save his own life while leaving his partner behind. He screams desperately, pleading for help as he runs in absolute panic through the dark streets of the city. The man bangs hard on a wooden gate, begging for anyone to open the door and save him. He cries out of terror and questions why such a terrible monster chose precisely them to suffer that punishment. Yeon So-hyun appears right behind the criminal, covered in blood and displaying a frightening, demonic smile. The young man bares his sharp teeth right next to the face of the man who is paralyzed by pure terror. A dark voice echoes in the air, warning that that terrible suffering is only the beginning of everything. Suddenly, the scene shifts, and we see Yeon So-hyun fallen on his back on the stone floor of an unknown place. The young man awakens slowly and looks at the stone ceiling, not understanding where he ended up after leaving the inn. He sits up, holding his head, trying to remember how he ended up stopping in that mysterious location. The young man hears a strange noise coming from the darkness and goes on maximum alert regarding the imminent danger. He looks around and finds himself in a macabre cave filled with ancient, open stone coffins. Yeon So-yeon analyzes the dark environment and wonders if he ended up stopping in some sort of underground tomb. A terrifying skeletal monster leaps from one of the coffins, with its eyes glowing and letting out a frightening roar. The young man walks calmly among the tombs and notes that the bodies look far too real to be mere corpses. A mysterious voice praises the young man's composure, calling him the heir to the legendary sacred scripture of darkness. A decrepit elder with dark clothes and glowing eyes emerges from the shadows, floating before Yeon So-hyun. The young man says with disdain that the old man's voice is horrible and sounds like there is mold growing in his throat. The elder lets out a bizarre and frightening laugh, showing that he finds the young warrior's audacity amusing. Yeon So-yeon smiles and asks if the old man's teeth rotted because he never took care of his oral hygiene. The mysterious man says that the scripture of darkness has finally found the perfect vessel this time. The young man counters, saying with all the confidence in the world that the demonic relic merely found its true master. The elder bursts out laughing and claims that in all his long existence, he has never met someone so bold. He brings his deformed face close and questions what a young man like him could possibly know about the power of that scripture. Yeon So-hyun explains that the scripture is a demonic artifact capable of distorting time and sending him to the past. He reveals that the relic was created from the blood and skin of 3 immortal beings who defied the laws of the world. The young man makes a respectful bow and humbly asks for the elder to teach him more about the legendary artifact. The old man is surprised and notes that the previous wielders of the book used to display only arrogance or madness. He explains that the others got lost in their greed for absolute power or simply lost their minds completely. The young man finds the elder's shift in attitude strange, as he suddenly started treating him with a lot of respect and politeness. The senior confesses that, in reality, not even he fully understands the mysteries of the scripture of the Dark Sovereign. He reports that the work was created to contain absolute darkness, though its real origin remains unknown. The elder glows his reddish eye and reveals he knows all this because he himself was once an immortal being. He corrects himself with sadness, saying he no longer possesses immortality and that his body is breaking down. The old man laments having fallen to such a miserable and weak state, while Yeon So-hyun listens to him in absolute silence. He reveals that he spent entire eras studying the artifact, and each discovery led him to even more mysteries. Despite all the difficulties and the extreme danger, he confesses that he simply could never stop researching. Yeon So-yeon is surprised to hear that an immortal studied the relic for so long and still doesn't know everything. The senior shares that many tried to dominate that absurd power, but everyone ended up being consumed in the end. He points at the young man with a smile on his face, guaranteeing that he sees in him a true spark of hope. The elder mentions that he has already initiated the necessary ritual, and the young man gets confused, not understanding what it's about. With an extremely macabre look, the old man asks directly if the young man doesn't remember devouring the victims. Yeon So-yeon widens his eyes in shock upon finally understanding the real meaning of the elder's words. He recalls his dark form covered in the blood of the people he himself eliminated in the dead of night. The young man realizes with horror that he transformed into a true ravenous demon under the command of the dark energy. The creature explains that the more wicked men he consumes, the more power of the dark scripture he will manage to awaken. Yeon So-yeon realizes that he truly no longer feels any physical hunger after absorbing that criminal's life energy. The elder reveals that this requirement of consuming wicked souls is the first and final price charged by the forbidden book. He explains that the relic serves to swallow all the rot in the world in place of a sky that has become weak and lazy. The master warns that the act of eating should not be literal, as the spirits of the book are the ones who will do the work of consuming evil. Several phantasmal and terrifying hands emerge from the darkness, covering the wrongdoer's eyes and mouth as he is taken to the abyss. Suddenly, the structure of the cave begins to shake violently as rocks begin to plummet from all sides. With a serene smile, the old master warns that their time on that spiritual plane is nearly coming to an end. The elder says goodbye, guaranteeing they will meet again, and wishes a good hunt to his new heir. The entire illusion of the cave collapses completely amidst a deep and noisy darkness of falling rocks. The daylight shines intensely over the beautiful and imposing structure of the pavilion where the young master's room is. Young-ah approaches the room's door, letting him know very politely that she has already prepared the young man's snacks and morning tea. From inside the room, the young man calmly orders her to just leave everything on the table, and the young maid agrees. Upon entering, she notices dozens of scrolls and martial arts books scattered across the floor in a disorganized fashion. Young-ah realizes that those works are extremely valuable and that any ordinary person would be eliminated if they tried to read them. The maid notices that the heir's eccentric behavior breaks all etiquette. As he makes a point of cooking with her, he insists on picking his own vegetables in the garden and has all his meals at the same table as his staff. The girl watches him cook, intrigued by the fact that a young man of such high status seems so accustomed to chores. She sits at the table timidly and asks if he truly wishes for a simple maid to eat along with him again. With a kind and sincere smile, the young man reassures her that he wants her to eat in his company today and every other day. Faced with the young woman's respectful refusal, the young master merely repeats with authority for her to stop talking and eat already. The third detail that catches the maid's attention is her master's behavior. While he reads his books peacefully, Young-ah focuses her golden gaze and concludes with absolute certainty that the young master possesses zero romantic interest in her. The young woman was known as the Ice Flower and used to attract the greedy stares of all the men around her. She remembers that the maids who fell into the clutches of the second and third young masters vanished mysteriously without a trace. Because of this, the girl was scared to death of catching their attention and viewed the oldest brother's indifference as her salvation. She begins to question whether accepting the butler's advice to serve the oldest brother was truly the best choice. Suddenly, a guard with a red bandana rushes into the room, asking for forgiveness for the intrusion. To give a report, Young-ah reprimands the soldier immediately, saying it is a major lack of manners to interrupt the master's meal. The frightened guard explains that a very important guest has just arrived at the pavilion, demanding their attention. He reveals that the newcomers are the elite soldiers of the personal guard that serves the family's main house. Young-ah widens her eyes upon realizing that that elite guard answers directly to the third young master's orders. The messenger adds that the guards are demanding that the new maid who arrived yesterday be handed over to them right now. The young woman realizes that the hidden dispute between the second and third brothers to see who would keep her has finally begun. She gets indignant and questions how the third brother's soldiers dare come all the way here to order what the oldest brother should do. The soldier sighs and says that since they claim to be fulfilling direct orders, he didn't have the authority to refuse the request. Yeon So-hyun slams his hand hard on the table, catching everyone's attention, and calmly orders the young woman to go speak with them. The maid looks back totally surprised and unable to believe that her master is just going to hand her over to the enemies. Without taking his eyes off his reading, the heir says they are making too much noise and tells her to go handle it already. Young-ah gets deeply irritated by the third young master's arrogance for trying to take her while breaking the house rules. She bows, accepting her master's order, but before she can leave, he orders her and the guard to wait a moment. The soldier with the scar on his face gets totally confused and points at himself, asking if the call was for him. With an extremely cold look, the young master stands up and questions who gave him permission to enter there without being called the warrior, tries to justify himself, saying that the messenger at the gate used to stand guard but has been missing since yesterday. Yeon So-hyun asks ironically if the absence of a watchman gives anyone the right to invade his room, however they please. Desperate over his master's fury, the man quickly kneels down, begging for forgiveness and swearing he will never repeat the mistake. The heir forgives the slip, but warns that from that exact instant, the soldier will be the new official messenger of the front gate. The warrior is left completely in shock upon realizing he was demoted to a simple gate guard as a punishment. Yeon So-hyun lets him know that the man's access to any other part of the property besides the gate is strictly forbidden. With a mocking smile on his face, the heir challenges the soldier to try disobeying his orders again if he has the courage. The guard accepts the order humiliated and complains in his thoughts about being demoted to a simple gate watchman. The young master asks why the soldier is still standing there, and the man runs off to fulfill his duty. Outside the residence, an arrogant warrior shouts, complaining about the lack of an appropriate reception for visitors. Young-ah presents herself politely before the visitor, trying to maintain her calm despite the man's rude attitude. The invader authoritatively orders the young woman to take him inside immediately because he needs to speak with the young master. The maid firmly refuses, explaining that the young man did not give permission for visitors and tells him to speak out here. The man grows furious at the young woman's audacity and begins to draw his sword, determined to resolve the situation by force. He advances furiously, shouting that nobody has the right to challenge his authority in such an insolent manner. Young-ah faces the threat with her golden eyes glowing intensely, showing she won't back down a single step. A violent impact sound occurs in the courtyard, startling the girl, who widens her eyes before the swift confrontation. The demoted watchman appears by surprise and blocks the enemy's sword strike with unbelievable and precise strength. The guard warns that that is a forbidden area and that nobody passes without having the proper maximum security authorization. The invader gets indignant and demands to know who he thinks he is to meddle in a matter that doesn't concern him. With his eyes glowing red, the experienced guard makes a final warning for the opponent to back away immediately. The enemy notices the sudden change in atmosphere and begins to break into a cold sweat upon realizing the watchman hides great power. Annoyed over having been demoted, the guard decides he will use that arrogant opponent to teach everyone there a lesson. Intimidated by the overwhelming strength, the man backs away, feigning calmness, and says his only business is actually with the maid. He points at Jung-ah and warns intimidatingly that she must accompany him to see the third young master. The young woman replies proudly that the third young master has absolutely no right to decide where she should go. The warrior gets enraged by the maid's answer, but she counters, saying she is simply following the family rules. Grinding his teeth, the man warns that he will love to see if she maintains that same arrogant stance before his master. The invader turns around and leaves, commenting that his master hates using things that have already passed through third-party hands. Upon leaving in a hurry, the warrior accidentally bumps into another senior official, and both grumble in anger over the incident. The newly arrived old man approaches Jung-ah, praising the excellent protection work they are performing there. The elder formally introduces himself as the personal butler, tasked with the matters and residence of the second brother. He arrogantly demands that the young woman guide him immediately to her master's presence, holding a letter in his hand with a serious countenance. The young woman patiently repeats that the oldest heir is not receiving any visitors today. The old man questions her word and warns that he has the important mission of delivering a personal letter from the second brother. The guard intervenes firmly and suggests that the butler simply leave the letter with the young maid and return to where he came from. With no other choice, the senior butler hands the envelope to Jung-ah with a very suspicious and intimidating look. He gets close to her ear and whispers darkly that her plans don't matter because she is in their hands. The young woman guarantees she will deliver the document, and the watchman comments that the master actually never forbade visitors. She admits she made the decision on her own because she feels zero genuine sympathy for the oldest heir. The watchman says he only warned her because she is the age of his daughter and wonders if she is just trying to protect herself. The experienced soldier questions the young master's real motives for not handling that commotion personally. He says goodbye, leaving the girl thoughtful, and asks her not to forget to deliver the second young master's letter. Jung-ah begins to reflect on her life since she was sold to that family and remembers the people who supported her. She realizes that, in reality, she never stopped to think about the true meaning of being genuinely loyal to someone. The girl notes that she always acted merely by trading favors and realizes she was treating the heir in the same cold manner. Sometime later, the maid enters Yeon So-hyun's quarters and delivers the mysterious letter from the second brother to him. Without showing any reaction, the young heir takes the envelope and coldly throws it straight into the room's lit hearth. Jung-ah watches the scene completely horrified as she sees the second young master's document turn to ashes in the fire. She warns desperately who the author of the message was, but the young man replies with total indifference that he already knew everything. The maid explains, stammering, that she believes the content of that letter was precisely to decide the fate of her life. Jung-ah asks if he is absolutely sure there won't be trouble for having burned the paper without reading it first. Yeon So-hyun replies with disdain that if the matter were truly important, his brother himself would have come to speak with him. The heir catches her by surprise, asking the reason why she herself didn't open and read the letter if she was so curious. He repeats in a very calm manner that if she was so worried about her fate, she should have read the envelope before delivering it. The young woman widens her golden eyes in shock and states fearfully that a humble maid would never dare commit such an absurdity. With a kind look, the young man tells her to forget the matter and calmly invites her to have some tea together. The hot tea is poured delicately into the cup, while the maid asks if she also has permission to drink with him. Jung-ah politely accepts the invitation and begins to take small sips of the tea under her master's watchful eye. Yeon So-hyun praises the wonderful aroma of the drink while the two sit across from each other at the table. The young maid holds her cup thoughtfully, trying to understand the real meaning behind the young man's enigmatic words. Suddenly, a memory from the recent past flashes in her mind, causing her to finally comprehend the truth. She remembers that the heir always made her taste all the dishes first before he himself began to eat. The girl goes completely pale upon realizing she was being used in a cold manner as a poison taster. She understands that the only reason for them to cook together all this time was because the boss didn't trust. Her Jung-ah grows sad upon noticing that to the young master, she was just another potential spy sent to watch him. The young woman stands up from the table abruptly and admits that she truly entered that residence as an intruder sent by others. Without taking his eyes off his readings, the young master merely agrees with the maid's honest and courageous statement. She apologizes for the late report and admits to having made up the excuse that he wouldn't receive visitors that day. Crying in regret, she calls herself foolish for pretending to know everything while ignoring the things that truly matter. The maid confesses she spent her life focused only on surviving without ever understanding the real meaning of serving someone. Young-ah falls to her knees on the wooden floor, begging for the oldest heir's attention and definitive forgiveness. She bows deeply, asking if he would accept her sincere devotion and absolute loyalty. From now on, Yeon So-hyun stared at her with his calm and deep gaze, maintaining the mystery regarding what his final decision will be. The heir asks if she is truly ready to swear absolute loyalty, even in the face of the greatest dangers in the world. With her golden eyes glowing full of determination, she guarantees with all the certainty in the world that she will make that oath. The young man asks if she knows anything about his father, and the maid replies she heard people say the patriarch is very sick. He reveals that in reality, his father is not sick, but rather has been in a coma for years due to a criminal poisoning. The heir shares that because of this, he always needed to look after his own food, and that he has already suffered numerous assassination attempts. The girl is shocked by the dark revelation and confesses she can't even imagine the gravity of such cruelty. Yeon So-hyun warns that this is just the beginning of that family's darkness and asks if she still wishes to serve him. Moved by the story, the young woman bows again and implores for him to allow her to be his faithful and devoted maid. Satisfied with the response, the young man hands her the rest of the burned letter and tells her to read the final lines of the document. The letter instructed the heir to treat her like a beast of burden if she confessed and to get rid of her if she tried to make a deal. The young woman trembles in terror upon reading the final recommendation that she should be assassinated and eliminated without a trace. Crying bitterly, she laments the betrayal of the chief of butlers, whom she considered a true father figure. Yeon So-hyun takes another sip of tea and asks if she now understands the real reason he showed her that paper. Wiping away her tears, the young maid confirms she perfectly understood the important lesson she just received. She says he showed her what true loyalty is in the middle of a world filled with conspiracies and lies. The young man smiles and says that to him. This idea of extreme loyalty is nothing more than pure madness created by weak minds. Even so, he asks if she remains firm in her decision to pledge her life to him if he accepts her service. With a slight blush on her cheeks, she guarantees the decision is his, but that her destiny now is to serve him faithfully. The young heir smiles warmly, showing he was highly satisfied with the girl's honest response. Night falls over the imposing tower of the pavilion, while silence and mystery take over the entire property. Sitting at the table with her master, the maid decides to share her sad family history that began in the merchant guild. She remembers fondly the time when she lived in harmony, alongside her beloved father and her incredible older sister. A memory shows the young woman smiling happily before tragedy and financial ruin overtook her family. The guild faced problems, and they resorted to a dangerous underground loan that ruined their lives forever. She explains that the scammers lure victims with low interest rates before charging over 10 times the original value. Because of the unpayable debts, she and her sister ended up being sold as maids to pay off the merciless collectors. The heir asks if her sister was truly that talented, and Young-ah guarantees she has always been a brilliant person. The image shows Young-ah's older sister wearing an eye patch and displaying a serious and very focused countenance. The maid reveals that her sister currently lives in the city of Loyang, working as a highly respected informant. Yeon So-hyun focuses his gaze on the maid, finding her older sister's current profession extremely interesting. She shares that she recently received a message from her sister, saying she had finally discovered the culprit behind their ruin. With her face consumed by rage, the girl reveals she will never forget the name of the muscular and foul-looking man. The young heir asks if the fellow's name was Gumjil, and she confirms that that was what everyone called the bandit. Yeon So-hyun asks if her older sister truly works as an informant of secrets in the city. He takes a sip of his tea and proposes that they visit her sister the following day to catch up. Young-ah is left extremely surprised and happy over her respected master's unexpected and generous proposal. The young man says with a friendly smile that they will be able to spend the whole day there so she can talk to her heart's content. The following morning, the young maid appears in the courtyard wearing her usual clothes and lets him know she is ready. The young man examines her from head to toe with suspicion, leaving the girl worried about her simple appearance. He says her garments are far too simple to accompany the family's young master and calls over the new watchman. The guard with the scar approaches, grumbling about the watchman nickname, but the heir tells him to keep quiet. The young man orders the soldier to go to the palace's inner area and bring the finest female attire from there. The warrior gets indignant over the absurd order to fetch women's clothes and questions his master's command. The heir threatens to demote him to a pavilion stable cleaner if he doesn't run immediately to fulfill his duty. Afraid of receiving an even worse punishment, the frightened guard runs off at high speed to fetch the clothes. Yeon observes his departure, impressed by the soldier's incredible agility and swift movements. The warrior runs leaping across the roofs, furious about being humiliated, and promises himself to endure just a bit longer. He returns empty-handed, reporting that the staff refused to hand over the clothes for the young master. Yeon grows thoughtful, and the maid suggests they set off just like that since it is already getting late. The young man places his hand inside his garments, remembering he had forgotten a very important detail in his pocket. Suddenly, he strikes the watchman's forehead with a heavy golden object, startling the man with the sudden action. The soldier examines the golden item in shock, while the young master tells him to go back there and show the official seal. Having no patience for the complaints, the young man gives the soldier a kick, ordering him to run along to sort this out. Young-ah observes the scene with wide eyes and asks, very surprised, if that object truly is what she thinks it is. Yeon displays the golden seal, calmly confirming that it is the official seal of the family patriarch. The maid is shocked that he possesses an item of such immense authority and asks the reason why the seal is with him. The heir smiles, saying that with his father in a coma, the supreme leader's seal could only stay with the oldest son. The golden seal of the Sword of Luoyang is a mystical artifact of absolute power, granted personally by the emperor. The young man confesses he usually uses the sacred seal for trivial things, like buying brushes and books since childhood. The girl is left completely speechless and disbelieving over the revelation of how her master uses such an important item. A beautiful housekeeper named Wu Huayan arrives accompanied by several maids carrying boxes full of expensive fabrics. The young heir smiles victoriously, commenting that things would have been easier if they had cooperated sooner. The housekeeper trembles with anger in silence, but maintains her respectful posture and asks for permission to leave the courtyard. An immense amount of chests and luxury goods is left in the courtyard for the exclusive use of the heir's new maid. Young-ah examines the valuable silks worriedly and comments that such luxurious clothes do not match her simple position. The heir guarantees she will wear such attire frequently in the future since she is now under his care. The girl clenches her hands tightly, deeply moved by the generosity and sincere concern her master displays. She expresses her thanks with a lowered head, gladly accepting the gift with a great feeling of gratitude in her heart. The narrative explains that the prosperous city of Luoyang became the largest economic and commercial center of the entire empire. The city's residents gossip in the streets, drawing everyone's attention to the passage of the illustrious visitors. The men praise Young-ah's striking beauty, but one of them warns his friend to be careful with his stares. He alerts that the guard accompanying the beautiful young woman belongs to the powerful and feared Luoyang sword family. The soldier walks seriously, complaining quietly about having to act as a personal bodyguard amidst the market crowd. The heir suddenly announces he has a private matter to settle and says he will meet up with them later. The guard despairs, asking if the young master truly plans to leave his own protector behind on the street. The young man confirms calmly and orders the soldier to focus solely on ensuring Young-ah's safety during the journey. In the blink of an eye, the young heir mysteriously vanishes, leaving the experienced warrior totally confused. The soldier complains, irritated, and lets the maid know he will need to leave her alone for a moment to go after the boss. The young woman smiles kindly, saying she knows how to defend herself, and asks him to focus on protecting the heir she so admires. The guard leaps furiously toward the city roofs, determined to find the swift young master's trail. The warrior runs at high speed, leaping over the high walls of the residences to try and spot the young man from atop a roof. He examines the region and realizes, frustrated, that the young master vanished without leaving the slightest trace. The soldier is left completely shocked and breaking into a cold sweat as he questions what the heir's true identity is. The long-haired protagonist arrives before an old wooden door that begins to open slowly. The large door creaks open, revealing a beam of light that illuminates the dark and dusty environment. He takes his first step into the mysterious place, while a voice alerts him that he has finally arrived. A quite battered older man full of scars on his face receives him in a humble manner and invites him to step inside. The elderly man lets out a cry of absolute terror upon encountering the complete destruction of his house's courtyard. He gets extremely outraged upon realizing that the wicked thugs from the Black Bone sect passed through there. Desperate over the situation, the man runs to look for his wife and find out if everyone is all right. The wife and children run to meet him, relieved to see that the family father managed to return. He embraces his beloved family, crying with emotion because they are all alive, despite all the chaos of the invasion. The protagonist observes the emotional moment in silence, while everyone cries holding each other in the courtyard. The woman looks surprised and intrigued at the mysterious long-haired young man accompanying her husband. Thinking it is a debt collector, the man kneels down, begging for clemency and swearing to pay his terrible debt. The family joins him in tears, desperately pleading for the stranger to spare the father's life. The elderly man tries to calm everyone down, explaining that the mysterious young man actually saved his life from certain demise. The artisan's wife wipes away her tears, highly relieved to discover the real intentions of that silent young man. She bows deeply, thanking him immensely for the protagonist's kindness in saving her husband. The entire family bows with respect before the young man, while he continues observing them all without saying anything. The elderly man smiles gratefully and invites him inside his humble residence to have a cup of hot tea. The protagonist politely accepts the invitation, letting them know he will enjoy their hospitality for a moment. The man serves the tea, worried that the low-quality beverage might offend his savior's refined palate. The young man drinks a sip and praises the tea in a very polite manner, saying the beverage's aroma is excellent. Rice at the table. The young man rejects any reward and asks about the criminals who destroyed his workshop. The artisan reveals that those men serve the dangerous Black Bone sect led by the cruel Gumju. He explains that the criminal group controls the gambling houses and acts as a merciless loan shark throughout the region. The young man questions the reason why the artisan went to gamble, knowing that that was an obvious trap by the group. The protagonist remembers he helped create the law that limits interest rates and hears that the sect forces gambling to bypass it. The young master takes another sip of tea and asks if the man knows anything more about the faction's leaders. The worker sighs, lamenting that simple people like him do not possess access to such important secrets. The young man closes his eyes thoughtfully and says calmly that he perfectly understood their terrible situation. He expresses thanks for the warm reception and lets them know it is already time to depart and continue his own journey. The elder begs to know the hero's name, but the protagonist calmly asks for them not to worry about that. The family prevents him from leaving, stating they would never allow their great savior to go away without receiving anything. The young man looks intrigued at the floor upon spotting a curious detail scattered by the corner of the workshop. Several colorful masks made of clay are scattered in a disorganized fashion across the place's floor. He walks slowly toward a white mask that stands out, glowing mysteriously in the corner. The young man picks up the piece and lets them know he will accept that simple item to clear all their debt of gratitude. The elder goes pale from fright and lets out a horrified exclamation upon noticing which mask the young man chose to take. He confesses quite apprehensively that that bizarre mask was not manufactured by his own hands. The man points out that the piece is unfinished and that it doesn't even possess the holes for someone to manage to see or breathe. He reveals that the item was his mad father's final work and that he planned to destroy it for considering it cursed. Holding the mysterious mask, the young man questions what could have been the reason for his father to have left this work. The artisan counters, saying that the actions of a person who has already lost their sanity possess zero real logic. The young man smiles mysteriously and asks if something tragic happened before his father lost his mind. Shocked by the question, the artisan inquires how he discovered that and reveals he had an extremely talented brother. He shares that his brother was unjustly accused of a crime and that his father begged for a local inspector's help. That corrupt official demanded an enormous bribe, forcing the family to borrow money from the sect. Despite having paid the demanded amount, the only thing that returned to them was his brother's icy corpse. The family wept over the body and discovered with horror that the corrupt inspector himself carried out the young man's execution. He reveals indignantly that everything happened because of a macabre wager between officials to see who had the finest item. The man says one of the nobles used one of his father's works in the wager, and the protagonist asks what happened next. He shares that the defeated noble grew furious and framed his brother, who would inherit the workshop, to get revenge on the father. The father protested daily until the inspector forged slander charges and ordered the guards to brutally assault him to ensure the master artisan never made another work. The officials completely destroyed his hands. The young artisan needed to carry his own injured and mutilated father back home under the weight of such massive injustice. The old master locked himself in the workshop, overtaken by suffering, and his son only managed to see his body after he passed away. Upon listening to the whole report, the young master asks if he still hasn't realized the true secret behind the mask. The artisan kneels down, begging for the young man to reveal the mystery that he himself could never uncover about the work. The protagonist analyzes the details of the rustic piece and explains that it was obvious the object wouldn't be polished perfectly. He describes that the old artisan had lost his mind completely and stopped eating, consumed by absolute hatred. Without his two hands, he sculpted the white mask using only the tools held between his bloody toes. The only thing keeping that agonizing body alive was the pure fury born from such immense humiliation and suffering. The old man used the last remnants of strength left to him and took his final breath at the exact instant he concluded the work. That was how a cursed artifact was born, charged with the eternal rancor of an extremely wronged soul. The hatred over the tragic destruction of his entire beloved family became fully sealed inside that terrible mask. The protagonist realizes that the strong resentment of that soul guided him to that workshop to deliver proper justice. Holding the powerful artifact, the young master releases a frightening magical aura while the residents sleep on the floor. The artisan's wife rests peacefully after finally being freed from all the weight of family afflictions. The young man understands that the deceased artist at last found peace and understands the reason why the mask has no eye holes. He concludes that the creator had total capability to sculpt the openings, but simply chose not to do that. The young master lets out a sinister laugh and places the enigmatic object over his own face in the darkness. He explains that the artisan made this drastic decision simply because he could no longer bear to look at this cruel world. Meanwhile, the story moves to a dark and quiet alley located in the busy region of Luoyang. In a secret room, a master tattooist draws another detailed skull on the skin of a giant and muscular man. The elderly man comments that he gained one more death mark on his arm, indicating that another person ended up losing their life. The tattooist displays a greedy smile and asks if the customer liked the final result of the macabre design on his skin. The huge blindfolded warrior curtly orders the old man to stop the service and leave him alone. Suddenly, the local's heavy wooden wall is completely destroyed by a violent attack coming from the outside. Several invaders dressed in black leap toward the muscular warrior to initiate a bloody confrontation. Without displaying any concern, the giant smiles confidently, stating he was already waiting for them. One of the enemy warriors advances with extreme speed, delivering a lethal sword strike toward the target. The giant activates his internal energy, making his eye glow red, and prepares his fist with a sadistic smile. He lands a devastating punch directly on the opponent's face, who lets out a groan of pain as he is hurled far away. Another opponent leaps from the ceiling trying to surprise him with a sharp blade, but the brute reacts at the exact same time. The immense warrior focuses all the extraordinary strength of his muscles to deliver another crushing attack. He strikes the wooden floor with such violence that he destroys the structure and hurls the adversary through the air. With agile movements, he swings his huge body, delivering brutal and precise strikes against the remaining enemies. The sound of quick footsteps echoes through the destroyed room, while the survivors try to find an escape route out of there. The warrior stands firm in the center of the hall, while another adversary tries to attack him by surprise, coming from above. He blocks the onslaught easily and lands a punch charged with energy that defeats the opponent. Instantly, the entire room gets filled with debris and fallen bodies while the brute laughs out loud at the invader's failure. He steps over the defeated man, mocking his skills, and says that is the difference between a warrior and a worm. Laughing heavily, the giant lets the startled tattooist know he will need 4 more skull marks on his arm. The older brother appears carrying a piece of wood on his shoulder and comments that he made a tremendous mess again. The younger one lets him know he had a lot of fun, and the older one reports he heard an extremely strange rumor coming from the streets. The red-eyed giant focuses his gaze on his brother, demanding to know what the news is that left him so intrigued. He shares that the merchant who had his shop confiscated is back at work as if nothing had happened. The younger one gets astonished, since he thought the family had been eliminated, and hears that a mysterious scholar was there. The giant stares into the void thoughtfully, trying to comprehend who that bold student could be who decided to face them. The older brother infuriates, demanding to know who would dare reopen a shop that was confiscated by Master Gumjil. Decided to resolve the mystery, the two giants walk side by side through the city streets with threatening glares. The two brothers arrive at the destination, determined to find the mysterious scholar who dared challenge the sect. They spot the young master sitting calmly before a table inside the intact establishment. The brutes smile arrogantly, commenting that the young man looks too young to be a real threat. Oblivious to the dangerous invader's presence, the young man continues sculpting a small wooden Buddha statue. The two take heavy steps into the place, decided to personally interrogate the silent young man. The younger brother displays a sadistic smile and curtly demands to know where the artisan fled to. The young man slowly raises his head, revealing he is wearing the mysterious and bizarre white mask with no eyes. The criminal feels a sudden shiver of terror and tries to disguise his fear by cursing at the mask's look. The older brother approaches in an intimidating manner and orders the young man to answer the question immediately. The protagonist completely ignores their pressure, keeping the mysterious mask turned in the direction of the two. He merely gives a light tap to the statue he was sculpting, demonstrating total indifference toward the threat. The young man asks with a dark voice if they by any chance know the true face of the Buddhist deity. The criminals get extremely confused and question mockingly what the stupid young man is talking about. The young master concludes that it is a tremendous folly to try discussing enlightenment with such wicked people. He remains standing in an extremely calm manner, holding the small wooden sculpture behind his back, irritated by the silence. The brothers decide that the best solution will be to beat the young man until obtaining answers. The older giant advances confidently, stating the slender young man doesn't deserve even the effort of a single punch of his. The younger one looks at the shelves confused upon noticing that all the masks destroyed by the thugs vanished. He remembers that his men stole everything of value and left the workshop completely destroyed the previous day. The brute finds it odd that the place is perfect and begins to suspect that some sort of dark magic was used there. Decided to find answers, the villain opens the back door looking for the young master's whereabouts. Suddenly, a wicked laughter echoes through the environment, and a purple and dark smoke begins to emerge from the room's darkness. Several skeletal and terrifying hands emerge from the ground of dark mist and grab the startled warrior's legs. The older brother lets out a cry of terror upon perceiving the terrible magical energy that takes over the entire venue. A colossal dark hand of pure dark energy advances quickly toward the huge fighter's neck. The terrible claw of darkness squeezes the brute's neck with a lot of force, while he screams desperately. The villain tries to resist, but the suffocating force prevents him from breathing, making him groan in agony amidst the smoke. In the blink of an eye, the other brother is hurled in an extremely violent manner against the corridor wall. Desperate upon seeing the scene, the younger one runs toward his older brother, trying to save him from that malevolent force. He roars furiously, but panic takes over his face upon noticing that the dark presence is far too powerful. Several black arms emerge from the shadows, pinning his legs and preventing him from managing to take one more step. The criminal is ruthlessly dragged to the floor, letting out a desperate cry of pure pain and suffering. He tries to hold onto the wood, scratching the ground with his nails, but the hidden force continues pulling him with everything. The man cries in absolute terror, clamoring for help while being swallowed by the deep darkness of the room. A final and terrible cry of agony echoes through the quiet workshop, marking the brutal end of the two wicked brothers. Demonic faces emerge amidst the purple mist, smiling at the fall of the wrongdoers who were devoured by the darkness. Grim laughter echoes through the place's darkness, celebrating the dark justice that was applied to the criminals. The image shows one of the masks glowing with a sinister greenish color, while the phantasmal laughter ceases. The scene shifts to the protagonist sitting in silence in the middle of a forest, while the breeze moves the leaves around. He continues sculpting the wood thoughtfully, admitting he still hasn't fully comprehended the mysteries of life. The young master reflects that merely copying the shape isn't enough, and wonders what the true facial features of the deity were. Sitting on a rock under the soft light of the sun, the young man finally concludes his beautiful and detailed sculpture work. He gives a light tap to the finalized statue, revealing that the sculpted deity possesses a completely smooth face. The young man places the work over the master artisan's grave, wishing for the entire family to finally rest in peace. He focuses his determined gaze, swearing to destroy the sect, and lets it be known that the humiliations against him won't work anymore. With a serious look, the young man guarantees that the enemy's mockery will be the only form of resistance left to them. The story travels to the sumptuous pavilion of Luoyang, where major political conspiracies are about to begin. Jung-Ah's beautiful older sister, who acts as an informant, reports that the Sword Clan faces total political chaos serving the tea. She explains that the successor's power grows, while the sick patriarch's influence has weakened. The experienced informant with the eye patch reveals that terrible rumors of poisoning have returned to circulate through the shadows. Jung-Ah drinks her tea calmly and says in a friendly manner that gossip about poison is nothing more than a tremendous absurdity. The older sister smiles in a provocative manner and comments that she still hasn't managed to win the young master's trust. The maid takes another sip, knowing that her sister's provocation has the sole goal of tearing out the Luoyang family secrets. She bangs the cup on the table firmly and warns she isn't naive to the point of falling into such an obvious trap by her sister. The informant with the eye patch insists that the entire political ruin of the family is the oldest heir's total responsibility. Young-ah defends her master, arguing with a serene smile that he possesses no fault for the clan's wrong decisions. The older sister gets irritated by the bold answer and questions how the younger one dares speak in that confrontational way with her. The young maid widens her golden eyes, extremely furious with the tone of superiority her sister is using. The informant says she was perplexed to learn that she decided to switch sides and swear loyalty to the oldest brother's pavilion. The maid notices apprehensively that her sister obtained this secret information at the same time as the other brother's spies, holding her long pipe. The woman confesses she doesn't understand the motives that led her to trust precisely that young man. She releases smoke with disdain and questions why she chose precisely the young man everyone knows as the man without a sword. Young-ah changes her countenance to a cold look and authoritatively orders that she never dare repeat that title again. Intimidated by her younger sister's serious and frightening reaction, the informant with the eye patch lowers her head, offering sincere apologies. She explains that as an espionage professional, she knows very well that the oldest heir is no ordinary person. The woman walks through the hall, remembering that the young master's rivals gathered powerful armies over the last 10 years. She questions what the young man could do against this power, and the maid guarantees she will find out if she keeps watching. Suddenly, the young maid's mystical golden eyes flash intensely upon sensing a terrible external threat. An extremely loud and violent noise of heavy footsteps echoes through the palace corridors, startling the two sisters. The hall's large wooden doors are brutally broken down with a destructive crash that scatters dust in the air. Several highly strung criminals invade the quarters, shouting orders to immediately capture the organization's leader. The two freeze in panic upon recognizing the invaders as the dangerous assassins belonging to the Black Bone sect. Young-ah realizes that attacking a neutral information agency in broad daylight is practically a suicide mission for the sect. The group's leader crawls toward them, praising the young woman's beauty, and orders her to come along peacefully with them. The assassin extends his claw in the direction of the informant's face, leaving the younger sister desperate for her sibling. Meanwhile, the story cuts to the busy streets of Luoyang, packed with pedestrians and typical food stalls. The bodyguard with the scar on his face appears desperate and relieved to finally find the young heir again in the crowd. The young master stares at him coldly, questioning why he is shouting, and the soldier tries to apologize, stammering in fear. The young man calmly eats his meat skewer, while the soldier sits exhausted, explaining he was worried about Young-ah. The heir opens an enigmatic smile and questions if the young maid would really be running any true danger. The soldier gets totally confused by his master's calm and enigmatic response, not understanding what he wants to say by that. The young master flashes a slight and mysterious corner smile, demonstrating he has already planned every detail of what will unfold back at the pavilion. The young maid grabs her sister's metal pipe, firmly warning that she will borrow the object. With incredibly swift and precise movements, she spins the metallic pipe, preparing herself for the imminent combat. She strikes the first opponent's neck with a dry metal blow that makes the man scream in extreme pain from the impact. The criminal falls passed out and motionless onto the wooden floor, raising a curtain of smoke with the force of his violent fall. The remaining thugs take a step back, completely startled by that maid's unexpected skill and strength. Young-ah holds the object as if it were a combat staff, adopting a formidable defense stance before the group. The leader mocks her stance, warning that trying to fight without being a real martial artist is a terrible idea. The sister with the eye patch gets very worried, knowing that the younger one will face terrible limitations against real warriors. The young maid stands firm and isolated in the center of the room, surrounded by 5 hefty opponents ready for the onslaught. She looks back and calls for her sister, demonstrating she fully trusts in her help to overcome that situation. Squeezing the metal handle with extreme strength, she asks in a tense manner how much time she will need to endure the fight alone. The sister replies that 15 minutes are enough until all the palace's secret defenses and traps are activated. The assassins advance, laughing mockingly, and warn that the warning time is over and that they won't have mercy on either of them. 3 criminals run toward her at the same time, delivering dangerous attacks to quickly finish off the resistance. One of the opponents tries to deliver a direct and devastating punch against the face of the young maid, who remains focused. With her rare golden eyes glowing intensely, she guarantees she can predict their every breath and movement. Using her extraordinary gift, she dodges the strike with extreme ease, tilting her body at the exact moment. She takes advantage of the opponent's opening and delivers a well-aimed strike with her metal staff directly under his chin. Young-ah strikes the opponent with the metal handle in a spectacular manner, completely destabilizing the rival. Another thug warns, shouting that she is no ordinary girl, and orders that nobody hold back when attacking her, demonstrating absurd reflexes. She dodges and delivers precise strikes against the men trying to corner her. The enemies hit the floor defeated, while the informant with the eye patch watches everything completely disbelieving. The older sister gets marveled and lets out a sincere praise upon realizing her younger sibling's surreal combat potential. She reflects intrigued how the young woman manages to defeat the criminal group's elite, even without ever having trained martial arts. The leader of the surviving thugs draws his sword furious, cursing the girl with every possible name for the humiliation. He advances, leaping in her direction, threatening to make her bleed while the older sister screams desperately for help. With a psycho smile, the assassin tries to deliver a lethal cut, but the maid remains in an impeccable stance. Using her incredible agility, the young woman dodges the cut and strikes the opponent's face, making the villain spit blood. She executes an impressive sequence of quick attacks against the final enemies trying to strike her. The last criminal is struck in the head with a definitive metal blow that finishes the combat in the hall once and for all. The brute collapses totally defeated onto the floor, while the victorious and tired maid tries to regain her breath. The sister asks if she learned that in the clan, but the young woman reveals she merely observed the techniques from afar. The older one confirms she still doesn't have the strength to dispatch someone and wonders what that visual technique means. All the elite guards lie defeated and scattered across the carpet of the secret agency's sumptuous office. Suddenly, imposing steps echo at the entrance, and a new mysterious figure arrives, questioning what happened there. Upon listening to the cold and frightening voice, Young-ah changes her countenance to total panic, recognizing the person immediately. The beautiful and merciless leader Gumju enters accompanied by her most dangerous officials, ridiculing her own elite. Wearing a fine red attire, she smiles in a sadistic manner, Yang commenting that palace's reception is terrible. The terrifying commander curtly orders all her incompetent subordinates to get out of there at that exact moment. The informant with the eye patch demands explanations and seriously adverts that her actions will bring severe consequences. Gumju ignores the threat and approaches, complaining in a mocking tone for not having received even a simple cup of tea. The informant says she is delusional, and the villain counters, smiling that her rival's mind seems to have gotten stuck. The blonde laughs in a wicked manner and asks if her enemy would be alive, case she were there acting with hostile intent. At that exact instant, one of her assassins will deliver a swift and imperceptible strike in the direction of the agency's leader. The informant in the dark mantle is struck by surprise, grazed on the face with no time to sketch any type of reaction. A trickle of blood begins to run down her cheek. Demonstrating the lethalness and precision of the dangerous opponent, Gyumju praises the fact that her rival didn't blink at the attack and says she would like to see her guards with that courage. The villain walks through the room, reporting that her tax collectors have been suffering many ambushes lately. The informant with the eye patch counters sitting down and argues that is the common price of an aggressive land expansion. The blonde confesses she suspects her rival is the culprit, and the informant mocks her for causing chaos based solely on intuition. Gyumju approaches with malice and asks if her rival doesn't find it odd to have been found precisely without her defenses. The cruel leader reveals with a victorious smile that she now possesses an excellent source of information that is much more powerful. The informant questions if this source accused her, and the villain guarantees it doesn't concern an ordinary amateur organization. Gyumju places her hands on her first stole and begins to feel an important and mysterious golden metal object. She withdraws a golden crest from her pocket, stating that the item belongs to the most influential organization of all the planes. Young-ah gets completely terrified upon recognizing the medallion belonging to the powerful Sword Dynasty. The villain asks mockingly if the young maid recognizes the object while the informant demands to know her identity. The young maid with golden eyes remains in absolute silence, fearing for the terrible fate that awaits them all. The blonde displays the crest laughing out loud and says that now she understands why the sect doesn't fear any political reprisal. Suddenly, the young master appears at the window and asks in a very casual manner if he can examine the golden crest. All the women present in the quarters turn in absolute shock upon recognizing the heir's unexpected presence. Yeon So-hyun leaps inside the hall with a friendly smile, happily celebrating for not having arrived late. The tired guard appears right behind him at the window, grumbling indignantly because he preferred to climb the wall. The young heir replies, smiling that he did that because it looks much more stylish, and the soldier merely complains in silence. He walks over to the sect leader, holding his open hand out, and calmly asks for her to let him see the golden crest. Gyumju gets very surprised by the young man's casualness and questions if he truly thinks she will hand over the item for free. The thug with prayer beads on his neck takes a step forward furious, demanding to know who the cheeky interloper is. Yan So Hyun points to his humble bodyguard's clothes and asks in an ironic manner if the look says nothing. The thugs mock upon seeing the royal guard symbol, asking if he truly thinks they would be intimidated. The guard with the scar crosses his arms, maintaining his composure while the tension between them grows in a dangerous way. In the hall, Yan So Hyun smiles, warning in a very confident manner that despite the simple garments, he is an extraordinary master. The assassins burst out laughing, mocking the young man, and say that if he is a master, they are the greatest in the world. The heir merely sighs, finding their stupidity amusing, and calmly orders his guard to bring the golden crest. The soldier agrees at that exact moment, activating a terrible internal energy of reddish color that flashes in his eyes. With a firm step, he initiates his onslaught, making the floor shake with the force of his incredible spiritual presence. The sect thugs begin to break into a cold sweat and tremble in terror upon feeling the overwhelming pressure of the warrior's aura. On the second step, he draws his sword with mastery, leaving all the opponents in the hall completely paralyzed. The sect's most experienced assassins tremble out of fear upon realizing they have no chance against that absurd power. Taking the third and final step, the warrior moves at such an absurd speed that he seems to vanish into thin air. The feared Gumju widens her eyes in shock upon realizing the experienced bodyguard's swift and inevitable approach. In a fraction of a second, the soldier passes by the villain and snatches the crest from her hands with impressive dexterity. He lands with precision on the wooden floor, demonstrating having total control of his fantastic movements. The guard kneels with respect, delivering the recovered golden crest directly to his young master. Gyumju looks at her own trembling hands, whispering terrified that that man is indeed a legendary master. The young heir takes the bright metal artifact. Examining each of its details with enormous curiosity, he confirms to Yoonga that the piece is totally legitimate and displays the golden crest with a lot of satisfaction. The young man explains that the crest represents a solemn promise of mutual aid and eternal protection given by the dynasty. The experienced leader with the eye patch agrees thoughtfully, remembering that the object was always the greatest symbol of trust. Yan So Hyun laments smiling that nowadays this sacred item turned into just a mere toy to close business deals. The villain counters with arrogance, saying that even being common, the crest guarantees safety against the family's swords. The young man admits that ignoring the crest would ruin the clan's reputation, but warns that they must not abuse that luck. Gyumju smiles in a wicked manner upon realizing that the young man is the famous young heir known for not using swords. The young master stares at her fixedly with his deep blue eyes, calmly confirming his true identity. The blonde bursts out laughing and mocks, saying that his dramatic entry almost scared her and ruined her style. She ironizes, asking what a cowardly heir is doing. They're wasting his time instead of continuing to destroy the family. The hag continues with the insults, questioning if his plan now is to drag the clan's great name through the street. Mud, outraged over the blonde's audacity, the informant bangs her metal pipe on the table, demanding respect immediately. The leader with the eye patch orders with fury for the villain to shut her mouth, but Yan So Hyun remains perfectly peaceful. The informant rants, remembering that no matter what people say, he continues being the legitimate heir of the great dynasty. Gyumju mocks, asking if her rival truly sees a strong leader in that weak young man who knows nothing of the world. The villain displays the crest, stating that the second brother's support is infinitely superior to the firstborn's empty power. Suddenly, the blonde stops talking upon focusing her watchful gaze on the young maid, who is quiet behind the protagonist. She examines the girl from head to toe with a wicked smile, while the young woman tries to turn her gaze away. Embarrassed, Gyumju points her accusing finger and celebrates, saying that she is exactly the fugitive maid the second brother was looking for. Young-ah remains in absolute silence, feeling an enormous anguish upon having her past exposed in that cruel manner. The blonde finds the coincidence wonderful and says she never expected to find the young woman personally in the middle of that mess. She asks why the young maid rejected being the second brother's concubine to turn into a simple servant of a weak master. The hag mocks, suggesting she would be a great toy, and Jung-ah furiously demands that she not insult her master, with her eyes glowing and golden. The maid guarantees that a vulgar criminal has no right to judge the heir Gyumju, counters irritated, listing all the young man's weaknesses, and reminds that even his own family considers him a coward. She provokes, saying he is still better than a maid with no origins, and the young woman grows sad over the terrible humiliation. The history shows that the title of the heir without a sword was always a reason for jokes and mockery in all provinces. The blonde smiles victoriously upon noticing the maid's silence and challenges her to try saying anything to defend her boss. Young-ah weeps in silence, crushed for knowing her master is no coward, but realizes her words have no force. She feels completely helpless for not having power to defend him from that terrible humiliation before everyone. It is in this instant of despair that a firm and welcoming hand rests softly over the young maid's shoulder. Yeon So-hyun smiles and says to stop it right there because she is his personal maid, and he will get furious if they continue. Seeing that the joke lost its fun, the blonde decides to leave, promising that the sect will act in an impedosa manner in the future. The sister with the eye patch glares at the villain with an extremely furious look full of determination. Gyeomju smiles with disdain and warns that next time the young master won't be capable of saving her. The informant with the eye patch merely whispers her rival's name while she watches the villain move away. The terrifying sect leader says goodbye in a mocking tone, wishing for them to take care of themselves until the next encounter. The two sisters remain alone and quite tense with the whole dangerous situation through which they just passed. Suddenly, Young-ah falls to her knees on the floor and offers sincere apologies to her young master for all the commotion. The sister with the eye patch runs desperate to support the younger one, who has just passed out from exhaustion in her arms. The young maid has a red face and is sweating a lot due to the terrible physical and mental fatigue. Young-ah is laid on a comfortable bed, while the young master and his faithful guard accompany her closely. The guard gets extremely furious upon thinking about how the criminals dared stain his noble family's name. He squeezes his fist with so much force that he begins to tremble, lamenting that the legitimate heir has no real power. The protector laments not being able to penalize the criminals and asks for apologies from his boss for his own helplessness. There, Yeon So-hyun glares at him in a peaceful manner, saying he doesn't need to apologize for fulfilling his role perfectly. The young man advises the protector to return to the dynasty before being associated with his problems. The man gets anguished, arguing that his sole sacred duty is to protect the young master's life. The young master says coldly that there is no reason for him to sacrifice himself for someone who doesn't possess his real loyalty. Without having a way to counter the rational argument, the warrior lowers his head defeated and asks for apologies once more. The protagonist extends his hand and delivers a mysterious envelope for his faithful soldier to take with him. He explains that that is an official order, declaring that the temporary escort mission is ended. The soldier holds the paper firmly and accepts the departure order, withdrawing from the room in silence. He walks through the corridor irritated, thinking he has never felt as useless and helpless as today. The sister with the eye patch enters calmly and asks apprehensively if the young sibling is really going to be fine. The young man turns, remembering that she has already heard very well that the girl is merely sleeping because of fatigue. She narrows her eyes, questioning why he keeps measuring the girl's pulse for so long. The protagonist ignores the question, changing the subject to know if she brought the data on the Black Bone sect. She says she will only deliver the papers if he reveals what the real health state of her younger sister is. The woman gets startled, demanding to know desperately what the terrible illness is that afflicts her beloved sister. The heir picks up the documents, explaining smilingly that overworking is also a severe infirmity. Perceiving the joke, she gets irritated and questions his true motive for having requested that sex data. The young man analyzes the paperwork, deducing she is planning something extremely dangerous against the criminals. The informant crosses her arms and coldly counters, claiming her matters do not concern the heir. He curtly orders her to stop the plans, but the woman warns she isn't his obedient servant. The young master reminds that the crest is real and that she should know their intelligence division's strength. She shouts furious over him knowing everything and not acting, but he asks to continue the conversation outside the room. Under the quiet glow of the full moon, the conversation between the two continues in the palace's outer courtyard. The young heir initiates a new line of questions, questioning where the largest merchant house in the whole world is located. He also questions which is the strongest martial clan of all, knowing perfectly that it concerns his own family. She revolts upon establishing that the noble dynasty gave support to criminals while the simple people died of hunger. The woman rants, remembering that the criminals sucked the people's lives while other bad factions grew. The heir reveals in a dark manner that the dynasty not only ignored everything, but is actually using the villains. Shocked by the revelation, she demands to know why the young man did absolutely nothing to prevent that cruelty. The informant shouts, stating that the sect leader's harsh words of mockery were totally correct. She accuses the heir of just wasting time, using the confinement order as a cheap excuse. She warns she won't accept orders from a coward while she risks her own life fighting for something real. The woman stops walking upon hearing an extremely serious warning to never try messing with the sect leader again. Yeon So-hyun begins to tell an ancient story about two sisters who shared a strong bond of friendship. He walks slowly, reporting that the older sister was full of justice and hated the local criminals. The heir shares that the young woman risked everything to fight alongside her companions and ended up defeated. Upon discovering her sister's tragic end, the younger one, who possessed a genius talent, went completely mad with pain. Taken by absolute fury, the young genius attacked and eliminated without pity everyone responsible for the tragedy. The heir reveals that the enemies were too strong, and in the end, the talented young woman ended up hunted and eliminated without pity. The informant with the eye patch gets confused and asks apprehensively what the young master is truly talking about. He laments that those two past sisters didn't manage to leave even their names or their noble intentions recorded. He explains that they turned into traitors in the historical records and that the people cursed both of their memories. The informant admits in an apprehensive manner that her mind cannot comprehend all that mysterious conversation. He questions her if she intends to continue her crusade of justice, even knowing the danger of suffering terrible sacrifices. The young man asks if she will persist, even if totally innocent people end up perishing in the process of her vengeance. The woman with the eye patch widens her eye and firmly guarantees she would never allow such a tragedy to happen. He argues that changing history's course requires a lot of blood, but good people cannot bear to see innocents suffering. He begins to place the frightening white clay mask over his face while enjoying a dark silence. The informant with the eye patch takes a step back, overtaken by fright upon seeing the heir with the mysterious cursed mask. An immense amount of purple and dark magical energy begins to emanate violently from the young master's entire body. With slow and imposing steps, the protagonist walks amidst the darkness, mist that crawls heavily along the floor. He reflects in thought that his own birth status prevents him from leading a quiet and peaceful life. The young man thought that by abandoning his greed, he would manage to be free like the breeze that passes freely. He admits he failed to alter his own destiny, but guarantees that those two sisters' future is not yet written. The informant stands paralyzed with terror, feeling the frightening spiritual pressure that emanates directly from the young man. The mysterious young master warns he will closely observe if their paths in life end up crossing in the future. He decrees with a phantasmal voice that his own path in life belongs to the dark world of shadows and blood. A gigantic dark entity emerges floating in the courtyard while he wishes for them never to cross his path of pain. Regaining her breath, the informant with the eye patch asks desperately to know what that young man's real identity is. The narrative moves to the dark slums of Luoyang, where unscrupulous people turn into easy recruits for the sect. At the entrance of a black bone sect hideout, a bald and quite muscular guard watches the place in silence. The thug thinks with satisfaction about his future promotion until being abruptly interrupted by a mysterious call. He widens his eyes, quite confused and surprised to hear that unknown voice echo from so close in the courtyard. The white-masked protagonist emerges from the shadows, coldly asking if that is indeed the sect's secret branch. The bald thug stands up and mockingly warns for the slender young man to leave before he decides to use force. The masked young man merely smiles beneath his disguise, warning that at no point did he ask to join their group. Amused by the situation, the brute proposes a quick test, challenging the young man to endure just 2 strikes of his. He closes his huge fist, laughing in a confident manner while promising a special recommendation to enter the sect. The white-masked young man laments in a mocking tone over the thug's slowness, who still hasn't understood the gravity of everything. Furious with the mockery, the villain delivers a violent punch, demanding to know what the insolent young man came to do in that place. With extreme agility and without making any effort, the protagonist easily dodges the rival's heavy attack. In the blink of an eye, the young master appears mounted on the brute's shoulders, leaving the opponent totally confused. He firmly holds the guard's head, coldly declaring that he came with the sole goal of consuming them all. His free hand is enveloped by terrifying claws of pure darkness energy, ready to tear the adversary apart. He hurls the giant to the floor with an unbelievable strength and asks if they are ready for the grand feast. The bald guard tries to struggle desperately upon noticing he is pinned by black claws that emerge from absolute nothingness. The heir points his hand in the direction of the criminal and in a frightening manner orders him to begin singing in agony. He executes fluid and swift movements, releasing shockwaves that cut the air with an extraordinary violence. The villain lets out a deafening cry of suffering, while the young master squeezes his chest in a relentless manner. He laughs in a sinister manner, promising to crush each of his opponent's bones into 3 pieces without any hesitation. A demonic silhouette with sharp teeth projects from the darkness, happily announcing what the next stage of pain will be. He delivers a final strike of dark energy that hurls the criminal's inert body directly against the wall. The thug agonizes enveloped in purple energy flames, suffering the consequences of the terrible forbidden technique. He coldly observes the opponent collapsed on the floor, commenting in a mocking tone about the watchman's sad end. A dark and muffled laughter echoes through the courtyard's darkness, demonstrating his pleasure upon applying the penalty. The once unfinished clay mask seems to transform, revealing a demonic look of pure resentment. Quick footstep noises echo through the surroundings, indicating the approach of new enemies coming from the inside. 3 sect sword fighters come out of the hideout and shout startled, demanding to know who the masked invader lying in wait is. The heir with the demonic mask greets the group mockingly, making his terrible presence noticed. One of the clan guards shouts, completely terrified, demanding to know who that mysterious intruder actually is. They take a step forward, irritated, questioning how he dares cause such confusion at the sect branch. The masked young man coldly replies that they don't need to know his name and invites them to enjoy the feast. Calling the intruder a lunatic, one of the assassins advances furiously, delivering a violent onslaught in the air. Holding his huge sword with both hands, the villain shouts, stating the young man is begging to end right there. The heir blocks the devastating sword strike easily, demonstrating an absolutely flawless defense. In a swift movement, the protagonist grabs the aggressor's throat, who widens his eyes in pure panic and pain. He lands a brutal and definitive blow that makes the blood splatter, covering the environment with extreme violence. The defeated opponent's body falls totally lifeless onto the floor, wet with blood before his companions. Taken by hatred and despair, the other warriors advance together, determined to eliminate the invader at once. Laughing in a dark manner, the heir comments that indeed a true feast of demise is not complete without dancing. He gesticulates with extended hands, coldly ordering the criminals to try fighting with all their strengths. A colossal explosion of dark, magical energy expands through the courtyard, striking all opponents at the same time. The sect warriors are hurled through the air, letting out desperate cries as they are swallowed by the magic. He bursts out laughing, ironizing that hideout turned into a perfect hall packed with songs of pain and dances of agony. The aggressors spit blood and agonize while being torn apart by the terrible invisible claws of energy. The entire courtyard is taken by total chaos, with bodies being thrown violently by the purple energy blasts. A pile of totally defeated and bloody enemies collapses lifeless under the icy glow of the full moon. The silent invader stands perfectly upright, surrounded by the corpses in the middle of his own magical aura. He looks around with boredom and asks himself if all the fun of that night has already come to an end. The young man laments with disdain, stating he was just beginning to warm up for the true combat there. The young man holds a survivor's collar, who lets out a gasp of pain and absolute terror before the danger, raising the helpless man in the air. The masked one solemnly ignores him, while the victim begs desperately for life. The protagonist lets out a terrible, insane laughter, wondering which part of that body would be tastier to devour. Suddenly, an extremely swift and bright sword cut emerges, slicing the darkness in the air's direction. With superhuman reflexes, the masked young man tilts his head back, dodging the attack by a very narrow margin. The young man leaps back in an agile manner, while the sharp blade passes whizzing right before his glowing eyes. A skilled and imposing sword fighter emerges, assuming a combat stance, and warns he will be his next adversary. The new warrior executes a quick and devastating sequence of sword strikes, creating a whirlpool of cuts. The air blocks all attacks, using only the barrier of his dark energy that repels the onslaughts. The young master touches the ground firmly, maintaining perfect balance after repelling the rival's violent onslaught. He turns calmly in the sword fighter's direction, maintaining his frightening stance amidst the darkness mist. The white-masked young man smiles, commenting with irony that finally a fighter appeared who knows how to use martial arts. The two warriors stare at each other fixedly at a distance in the quiet courtyard, preparing the next lethal confrontation. Sweating cold, the sword fighter curses the opponent as a monster while raising his blade, concentrating all his energy on it. The clan warrior gives an extremely strong impulse on the ground, advancing with a shocking speed against the target. He lets out a furious cry, delivering a massive frontal attack focused on piercing the mysterious young man's chest. The sword fighter activates his secret technique, releasing a torrent of bluish cutting beams against the invader. The multiple strikes collide violently against the protagonist's barrier, generating sparks and major crashes. The air merely lets out a mocking laughter amidst the rival's attack, demonstrating total superiority there. The young master holds his blade with ease and asks with derision if that is the only power he has. Completely perplexed and sweating from despair, the warrior tries to back away, perceiving the adversary's surreal strength. The invader projects his dark claws, prepared to deliver a quick and lethal counterattack against the rival. He delivers a devastating ascending cut of dark energy that strikes full in the experienced sword fighter's chest. The sword fighter lets out a sharp cry of pain upon feeling his flesh being brutally torn apart by the dark strike. The defeated sword fighter's body collapses heavily onto the courtyard floor, raising a small cloud of dust there. The invader turns calmly, contemplating the damage caused while his dark aura continues to float around. He laments that the quick fight ended so soon, and that his fun lasted very little on that occasion. The scene moves to the dark stairs that lead directly to the dangerous sect's underground and secret chamber. The air calmly descends the dark steps of the place, passing alongside scary bones and skulls. The young man hears sudden sounds of struggle and cries of agony echoing further ahead inside that dungeon. One more clan thug appears attacking with fury and shouts for the invader to end at that exact moment. Without demonstrating any concern, the young man blocks the attack with his arm covered by his magical energy. He hurls the opponent with ease against the stone wall, destroying the locals' wooden structures, enveloped in purple and dark smoke. He continues walking in an imposing manner through the dungeon corridors. He arrives at the main chamber, encountering dozens of lifeless bodies chained and hanging from the ceiling. The heir analyzes that chillingly bizarre scenario, asking himself in an intrigued manner what place this is. One of the injured criminals crawls backward terrified, begging for the monster not to approach him. The young master steps on the injured man's chest firmly, keeping him pinned to the floor after discovering the place's atrocities. The lying villain lets out a cry of terror upon being immobilized without any chance to sketch a reaction against the invader. The man shouts in agony, clamoring over his mangled leg, while the young man perceives the place looks like a slaughterhouse. He sees that the bodies suspended from the ceiling indicate the group's extreme cruelty and concludes that this world is insane. The criminal calls him a monster, but the protagonist questions if what the sect does with innocent people is normal. The young man holds the guard's head while hearing the man cynically argue that the passings are just business. The villain shouts furious, justifying that the atrocities committed serve uniquely to guarantee their livelihood. Yeon So-hyun infuriates with the opponent's hypocritical excuse and prepares to apply a merciless punishment. With a brutal movement, he strikes the aggressor on the floor, making the man let out a cry of pure pain and despair. The young man delivers a crushing punch with so much strength that the sound of breaking bones echoes through the whole dungeon. The heir reflects on how they find it insane that he eliminates wrongdoers while the criminals call that business. He supports a startled young prisoner, asking himself in thought if he is the crazy one or if the world went mad. The story moves back to the beautiful palace that currently serves as Jumju's headquarters. Inside the palace, the beautiful and dangerous Jumju relaxes peacefully in a luxurious bathtub of hot waters, holding a red rose. The villain recalls thoughtfully the mysterious heir known as the one without a sword. She remembers the spy's reports, guaranteeing that the clan's legitimate heir shouldn't have departed today. The villain begins to suspect that, in reality, nobody possessed knowledge regarding the young man's real intentions and plans. She reflects that the young master she encountered at the palace displayed a confidence very different from the cowardice rumors. She finds it odd the fact that the young man maintained total calm in a room full of warriors armed to the teeth. Brushing aside the suspicions, the blonde decides to forget the matter and curtly warns that the bathtub water is cooling down. The startled palace butler gulps and immediately responds that he will resolve the temperature problem. The employee bows with a lot of respect and guarantees he will provide hot water for his lady without delay. He turns around shouting curt orders for the employees to bring more buckets with boiling water as fast as possible. Two hefty thugs bring one more weeping prisoner while cruelly ordering him to remain quiet. The cruel boss analyzes the new victims brought, complaining with boredom that they don't look very healthy today. The bald villain holds the victim by the hair, while the helpless prisoner begs in tears for mercy. Geumju coldly orders the start of the sacrifice while the poor victim shouts desperate for his own life. The executioner raises the sharp sword, preparing the lethal blow, completely ignoring the victim's cries of terror. A final and agonizing cry of pain echoes through the quarters as the blade fulfills its dark purpose. The blood gushes abundantly, mixing with the luxury bathtub water under the hag's indifferent gaze. She gathers the fresh blood in her hands, claiming relieved that she was very worried about the appearance of wrinkles with a sickly pleasure. The villain passes the victim's blood on her own face as if it were a rejuvenation cream. Gyumju lets out a hysterical laughter, feeling extremely powerful with that macabre bath of pure cruelty. Suddenly, a messenger arrives running, bringing the report that one of the group's factories was destroyed. Wearing her red robe, Gyumju turns in shock before the mirror, unable to believe the shocking news. With a deeply furious and threatening look, the blonde demands to know immediately who was the author of such audacity. The guard reports tremblingly that there are no details since all witnesses were eliminated in an extremely quick manner. Extremely irritated, the boss demands to know if the injured victims didn't manage to report even a single word. The thug replies apprehensively that the survivors only spoke of a terrible and destructive evil spirit. She narrows her eyes, intrigued, and the guard adds that some of the men mentioned seeing a white mask. Taken by an overwhelming fury, the blonde repeats the information, shocked by the emergence of this new enemy. Gyumju complains to her subordinate that everyone ended up gone so quickly that it was impossible to get a decent explanation from them. She deduces that her men must have gotten involved in a nasty fight with some great master of the martial arts. The thug recalls that last year, someone provoked one of those masters by accident, and an entire branch ended up being completely leveled. He explains that people born with the talent to manipulate chi are rare, and that it is even harder for someone to become a real martial artist. Furthermore, among those warriors, only a minority manages to break the barriers and reach the level of a true master Gyumju vents that, by working in this business, she realized they end up bumping into these masters way too frequently, and the thug nods in agreement. She orders them to tell the newer thugs not to pick fights and to stay quiet, hoping the enemy gets tired on his own and leaves. The blonde wonders what kind of unemployed fool is acting now, commenting that one shouldn't raise children with silly ideas of being a hero in their heads. She states that it is necessary to learn to live by adapting to the rules of the world, and the subordinate nods his head, saying she is absolutely right. The other muscular thug suddenly becomes thoughtful and wonders if the rumor about a ravenous phantom could make any sense. Gyumju notices the grumbling and asks if he heard some rumor, leaving the man a bit awkward as he begins to answer. He asks the boss if she remembers that those hired thugs sent to the gambling house vanished without a trace a few days ago. The other subordinate intervenes, saying they vanished out of nowhere, but since these contractors usually run away, they just ignored the disappearance. The muscular man admits that this is true, but insists that there is something very strange about this whole situation. Gyumju loses her patience for good and shouts, asking why on earth he is stalling so much to speak about what he discovered. Startled, he explains that he usually frequents that gambling house and ended up remembering a rather bizarre rumor he heard there, leaving her curious. The man shares that, according to the rumors, several people supposedly saw a monstrous spirit that day, and many said it was a ravenous phantom. He admits he doesn't usually believe in those silly ghost stories, but so many people guaranteed having seen it that it becomes hard to ignore completely. Irritated, Gyumju yells, demanding to know what that has to do with the matter, and reprimands him for believing in the talk of fools, making him apologize. She rants that, as business people, they should focus on having a productive conversation instead of talking about fake phantoms. Suddenly, she stops, widens her eyes, and begins to break into a cold sweat upon thinking of a frightening possibility that makes sense. Gyumju wonders if there could exist another bizarre being like her own master, who taught her strange martial arts of unknown origin. Suddenly, a messenger enters running into the place, totally terrified, shouting desperately that a horrible tragedy happened. The man yells that one more branch of the organization was attacked and ended up being completely destroyed by the mysterious invader. She asks anxiously if it was the man in the white mask again, and the messenger confirms in a hurry that it was exactly the masked fellow who attacked the villain. Laments deeply, taking a deep breath upon realizing they would still lose a few more territories before that masked man calmed down. She notes that, given the speed of the attacks on protected locations, the one responsible can only be an elite master, which her thug confirms immediately. She decides that the best thing is to just leave things as they are, since the thugs who end up gone can be easily replaced later. The thug agrees apprehensively, remembering that hiring underworld mercenaries or master-level vagabonds would cost a fortune for the organization. Tired of the conversation, she tells everyone to get out of her sight immediately and orders them to prepare a masseuse to help her relax from the stress. The man bows respectfully and replies that he will arrange everything she requested without the slightest delay. However, right after, the door is swung open suddenly and someone shouts desperately, warning that they are in gigantic trouble. The blonde turns quickly with an expression of pure panic, thinking horrified that it cannot be possible that another attack is happening. On the following day, the dawn arrives calmly over the immense and busy city of Luoyang, illuminating the traditional buildings of the location. A man gossips in the streets, asking the others if they learned that 5 secret hideouts of the Black Bone faction were destroyed in a single night. Another resident joins the conversation confused, saying he heard that in reality, 7 were the locations attacked by the mysterious invader. In the middle of the market, the people begin to debate over the real number of attacks, with some saying there were 10 and others claiming there were 15 bases. A woman comments shocked that no body was left behind, and the man adds that people claim not even a drop of blood remained. The people continue commenting, startled that the amount of missing individuals is countless, wondering who in the world would have the power to do this. Meanwhile, in the sumptuous palace of the Luoyang sword family, the patriarch complains irritated for being bothered in the morning with such a silly matter. Gyumju, who now wears a fine red dress, questions the clan patriarch if he really is saying that he possesses 0 information. The patriarch answers curtly, asking in a highly mocking manner when it was that he said such a thing to that cheeky girl. He faces the woman with fury in his gaze, asking if she is daring to insinuate that the great Luoyang sword family lacks information. Feeling the terrible pressure emanated by the clan leader, Gyumju gulps and takes a step back, breaking into a complete sweat from so much terror. Perceiving the danger of her insolence, she immediately bows in a very respectful manner before the throne and offers sincere apologies to the patriarch. The patriarch says coldly that she clearly doesn't know her place and must be delusional to act in such a cheeky way in front of him. He asks if she really thinks she received the family's bronze token because of some influence or respect he had for her father. Frightened by the implicit threat, the blonde immediately guarantees she never thought of anything of the sort and would never commit such audacity. With a look of pure boredom, the patriarch extends his hand and calmly turns a large wooden hourglass that was atop his side table. He warns impatiently that he has already lost nearly 15 minutes of his precious day because of her nonsense, while a maid approaches at his side. He curtly orders for her to vanish from his sight immediately. With no choice, the woman bows respectfully in absolute silence. She turns her back and begins to walk out of the immense hall. The old man throws a final warning, saying that if she disappoints him one more time, things are going to change. Gyumju stops walking on the spot, feeling a terrible shiver down her spine. He states coldly that he will pass the family's bronze token to another person. The blonde is left in complete shock over the clan leader's real threat. In the observatory of the clan's astronomer, someone shouts, telling his colleague to wake up already. The man continues sleeping deeply on top of a pile of books and bottles. The companion sighs, frustrated upon seeing that, and realizes he will have no other choice. He shakes his friend with force, yelling that it is an emergency, startling the sleeper. The young man asks him to pull himself together because he saw something urgent on duty, but the other mocks his effort. With a serious expression, the astronomer says that in reality, it concerns a sinister sign. The friend drinks a sip and disdains, replying that these omens are quite common. But the astronomer interrupts him immediately, guaranteeing that it is a gigantic omen. He reveals that the previous night he observed the legendary and terrible ominous celestial star. The colleague stammers in shock, asking if it is really true that that star appeared. He explains that, since ancient times, this star always brings bloody tragedies. Worried, the friend realizes that if this is true, the situation is extremely grave. He suggests they should report this urgent discovery to their superiors. The other laughs and asks who nowadays would believe in talk about an ominous celestial star. The astronomer insists they should at least report this to their supervisor official. The colleague thinks it won't make a difference, but agrees that even so, it is better to warn him. However, he remembers that this supervisor is the man with the least power in the entire family. Night falls over the village, and silence takes over the location under the dark sky. A group of villagers gathers around an elder, asking if he manages to see anything. Another villager asks to stop rushing the old master, because he is thinking. The blindfolded elder remains sitting on the ground in absolute silence. He says terrified that he doesn't see the sun, and that the sky is dark as if the light vanished. Suddenly, the old master seems to feel a bizarre presence approaching. He stands up quickly in shock, startled by the mysterious energy in the air. He shouts desperately, announcing that the great master of the dark heaven has finally appeared. The elder clamors that the forbidden scripture awakened and the ancient monster returned to the world. He warns that the master descended to penalize the wicked. Starting from the deep darkness, he shouts for the needy and hungry to rejoice over the master's arrival. He proclaims that the dark beam will descend, because the venerable of the dark heaven has just arrived. A villager questions if it is true, but the other laughs, saying the old man went senile. The elder laughs happily, celebrating that the true master finally showed up. The rumors say to respect the phantom of the white mask, the executor of the sky's punishment. In another place, someone is astonished that the Black Bone faction almost vanished in 2 days. The informant says the crucial clue is the evil spirit in the white mask. She recalls that the fellow she saw back then also wore this white mask. She turns to her bodyguard, Gyu, and asks what she thinks about this. Gyu seems a bit distracted and asks what exactly she is talking about. The boss reminds her of the first young master, and Gyu asks if she speaks of the one without a sword. The informant shouts, telling her not to call him that, and the guard apologizes on the spot. Gyu says she merely felt the young man was quite different from what the rumors said. The chief sighs and tells her not to go around, saying she works at the Crescent Moon Pavilion. The bodyguard comments, smiling, that she found the master very generous and understanding. She reveals she tried to intimidate him with her murderous intent, but he didn't even react. The clan informant grows thoughtful with the report and wonders if that is really true. She loses control and yells at Gyu, demanding to know what on earth she has been doing all this time. Later, the informant enters the kitchen silently and observes her sister Jung-ah cooking at the stove. Jung-ah turns surprised and asks if she is referring to her young master. The older one feigns disinterest, saying she just wanted to know what kind of man the master her little sister serves is. Jung-ah goes back to chopping the food very calmly and replies smilingly that there isn't much to say about him. The sister finds the answer odd, remembering that the last time she spoke ill of the heir, Jung-ah almost attacked her to defend him. She changes the subject, asking if her sister is feeling better, and Jung-ah confirms happily thanks to her master's care. Jung-ah advises that, if her older sister is that curious, the best thing would be to ask him directly. In the main quarters, the hot and aromatic tea is served delicately in a small white cup. Yeon So-hyun calmly asks for nobody to release murderous intent there, because that would ruin the tea's flavor. Gyu reassures the master, saying that mission is already over, leaving the informant completely confused at her side. The protagonist smiles in a friendly manner and offers the hot beverage so they can enjoy it right away. The informant expresses thanks, embarrassed, but comments that he didn't need to personally serve a simple bodyguard, but Gyu accepts the cup very gladly and happily, thanks the first young master's kindness. Gyu praises the tea's wonderful aroma, making her boss wonder if she is really being serious. He merely smiles with modesty before the praise, saying she is being too kind. The bodyguard counters, saying she isn't the type of woman who usually makes empty or insincere praises. The young master finds it funny and jokes that if she one day wants to change jobs, she can look for him whenever she wants. Gyu says she will certainly look for him if she loses her job, joking that her current boss's bad mood indicates that won't take long. The protagonist bursts out laughing at the formidable warrior's bold and honest reply. The informant is left stunned to see that Gyu, who is usually so demanding with people, is so at ease with him. Yeon So-hyun changes the conversation's tone to something more serious, giving start to the meeting's true matter. He asks what would bring a woman as busy as her to make a visit to an unemployed guy like him. The informant assumes an erect posture and addresses him with a lot of respect to begin talking about what she discovered. She goes straight to the point without hesitation and asks if he is the feared venerable of the dark heaven. The young master feigns total ignorance and calmly asks what on earth this venerable of the dark heaven would be. She explains that according to the reports of the survivors who fled the Black Bone faction branch, there was a mysterious savior. The warrior who rescued them wore a white mask and simple white garments, quite similar to those of a student listening to the details with attention. The protagonist merely comments, smiling, that this fellow seems to be someone very good. The informant narrows her eyes and says she knows very well that he possesses exactly this same type of mask and clothing. Amused by the audacity, the heir asks mockingly if she is planning to search his personal belongings. She demands to know why he doesn't tell the truth and asks what the real meaning of the words he told her in the past was. He merely holds his cup in silence, leaving the suspense in the air while he takes one more sip calmly. With a deep and mysterious look, he asks in a cold manner if she really is prepared to know. The woman faces him with unyielding determination and guarantees she is already totally ready to deal with the consequences. The heir questions her if she is ready even to endure the cruel endings of countless innocent people. She stands in shock for a second, but says she has been thinking non-stop about his words since that fateful day. She reveals she reflected a lot on the amount of blood necessary to completely change the course of her own story. Squeezing her fists with force, she says that if the sacrifice of innocence is really the price to be paid, she will accept it. She faces the protagonist seriously and asks if what he is planning is in reality a complete dynastic revolution. The young master crosses his arms with a corner smile and repeats thoughtfully the words about the dynastic revolution. He cites that, according to an ancient thinker, he who harms benevolence is a thief, and he who harms justice is a bandit. He continues his reasoning, stating that a criminal so relentless and cruel is nothing more than an ordinary peasant. He concludes that he heard that King Wu finished a traitor peasant, but that he never knew of any real king assassination. She listens attentively to the analogy and asks if the dangerous path he mentioned before refers exactly to that. A dark image emerges in her mind, showing mountains of corpses and seas of blood in a terrible demonic realm. She wonders if opening this demonic path to the underworld itself would really be possible in today's times. She confesses that this question goes beyond her capacity of comprehension, and that not even the brightest minds would know how to answer. The air reflects that the difference between rich and poor has never been so absurd. But even so, the world remains strangely stable. He states, smiling, that making a revolution in an era like this would be something completely absurd to try. The informant gets confused and asks what would then be the true path he intends to follow. He says he thought a lot, and that if blood really needs to run to change the course of things, he questions if it really needs to be the blood of innocent peasants who only fight to end under just any banner. With a bizarre smile on his face, the young man suggests that perhaps they should simply finish that same amount of villains. The informant is left with her jaw dropped at his frightening declaration and asks for him to repeat what he said. He asks what would happen if the blood spilled were only that of the bad, in the same amount that the innocents would lose. She thinks it is a joke of very bad taste and asks if he is really being serious about not hurting the innocents. The protagonist stands up calmly and soothes her spirits, replying that all of that is just a hypothesis. He walks to the back of the quarters with his back to the two and says he just wants to think about that possibility. The informant says that that is a childish thought because it is impossible to easily distinguish who is good and who is bad. She argues that laws and morality change depending on the situation, making it impossible to have a fair metric. She continues saying that nobody possesses enough power to hunt down so many villains and change history that way. She concludes saying that judging and penalizing others by own caprice is acting like a madman and generates an even greater evil. But, in the middle of her speech, a terrible snap of perception strikes her mind and leaves her completely breathless. She recalls the rumors about the masked reaper and the terrible executioner who carries out divine retribution against the bad, that merciless spirit who uses the dark beam to penalize the wrongdoers in name of the earth itself and the indifferent heavens. She perceives with total panic that the air in reality is the very and feared venerable of the dark heaven. The young man gives an enigmatic smile, saying he found that a great name and that his subordinates will also love it. She perceives that that silly hypothesis he cited about hunting only the villains was not just a child's thought. The young man says he is very curious to know if this venerable's plans will work out and if all this is really possible. She wonders if spilling the blood of wrongdoers for the weakest is really a path that only a monster without humanity can follow. Before such immense power and such a frightening vision, the informant falls completely quiet without knowing what to speak. She expresses thanks for the words and lets him know with a trembling voice that she needs to withdraw to resolve urgent matters of her pavilion. He merely observes the woman's retreat and calmly says she did an excellent job up to here with her investigations on the outside. The mistress comments that the Blackbone faction now possesses only its main operations base intact. She reveals she plans to go to the main base today itself, along with some of her elite warriors and other collaborators. In fact, the protagonist adverts her from his room that it is very dangerous, since the leader Gyeomju has her own family's bronze token. The informant calms the master, replying that they aren't going to invade the base, especially since there is already another person to do that dirty work. She completes saying they won't stand still, guaranteeing that no survivor will escape from that base with life today. She says that if the Sword family stirs up trouble with them because of an action as simple as this, they are just going to fight, since they only need to deal with the foolish leader who gave the bronze token to that criminal woman. She concludes saying with a lot of firmness that they possess sufficient determination to face anyone who opposes them. The protagonist merely listens and lets them depart, knowing that things are about to get extremely intense in the city. He stands looking at the landscape from his quarters balcony under the soft glow of sunset. In another corner of the city, the glow of an immense sword blade cuts the air with a lot of violence. The faction's giant thug coldly executes one of his own men, saying that nobody flees from the gang with impunity. The unfortunate victim's head rolls across the bloody floor before the merciless executioner. He glares at the rest of the group with hatred in his eyes, yelling, irritated, that everyone there is a bunch of cowards. He shouts with all the strength of his lungs that exemplary penalty is a direct order from Lady Gyeomju. He raises the bloody sword high and tells everyone to prepare at once for an honorable end. At Gyeomju's main base, the climate of extreme tension and despair consumes all the guards of the location. Gyeomju asks apprehensively if her father, the gang's supreme chief, also refused to send help to them. The subordinate lowers his head with a lot of regret and timidly confirms that yes, he denied the assistance. She laments frustrated, understanding that her father wouldn't spend valuable masters against an enemy of unknown power. She grinds her teeth with fury upon remembering that their family relationship is in reality a complete farce. She squeezes her fist, knowing that Master Gumjil's adopted daughters are nothing more than expendable pieces to him. The Ryu man warns that the leader sent a message to her, and Gyeomju furiously demands that he speak once and for all. The thug stammers nervous, hesitating to reveal the exact and cruel words of the organization's supreme leader. Upon hearing her own father's relentless message, she widens her eyes with fury and shouts in shock, unable to believe what she heard. She lets out a crazed cry of fury and kicks the furniture around her with extreme violence. Out of breath and full of hatred, the blonde grinds her teeth, feeling the bitter taste of her own father's betrayal. She pulls herself together quickly and coldly asks how many prisoners still remain at that main base. The thug explains nervously that not many remained, since they rarely did negotiations directly at that base. She laments, thinking she wanted to avoid to the maximum using that bizarre technique that her monstrous master taught her. Gyeomju curtly orders that he gather all the prisoners and useless civilians in the basement immediately. With an insane expression, she reveals she will perform the terrible dark ritual she learned from her master. Meanwhile, a raven flies silently over the roofs of the enemy base under the reddish sky. The informant's masked warriors wait in the shadows, reporting that there is still no movement. They prepare their sharp weapons and keep their attention totally turned toward the main objective. The raven flies low and passes, grazing the warriors positioned strategically on the roofs. One of the infiltrators makes a visual signal of readiness upon observing the bird's sign in the sky. Another masked warrior confirms the command with his head, preparing to act at once. A messenger reports directly to the commander that unit number 15 is already positioned. The man with scars in the room demands the immediate confirmation that everyone is at their posts. One of the ninjas leaps from the roof with great agility, falling in the direction of the enemy courtyard. Several other masked warriors follow him, descending like swift shadows in the direction of the base. They land in an extremely silent and precise manner at the combined strategic points. The subordinate kneels before the pavilion mistress and lets her know that all the area's civilians were evacuated. He completes reporting that all agents and allies are already positioned and awaiting orders. The mistress orders everyone to maintain their original positions and stay in constant vigilance. She guides them to follow the combat protocol. As soon as the attack begins, and the thug agrees, the sun sets completely, covering the immense enemy temple with an orange, intense light. Before that calm before the storm, a voice asks if she is feeling nervousness. Clue looks sideways at her boss, trying to calm her in that moment of great expectation. The mistress admits in a thoughtful tone that she isn't exactly nervous, but rather with a confused mind. She asks if the guard heard the conversation she had with the young master, and Gyu sidesteps, feigning foolishness. Gyu says in a joking tone to leave her out of any matter about revolution, but the boss insists. She demands to know her faithful bodyguard's sincere opinion regarding the figure of the first young master. Gyu replies she considers him a good man, though frightening, even knowing he is the sovereign. The warrior explains she doesn't have a very logical motive for that, it being just a matter of her intuition. With extreme loyalty, Gyu guarantees to her lady that she will follow her faithfully wherever she goes. The mistress smiles lightly at the declaration and affectionately tells her friend to follow her heart. The bodyguard agrees softly, touching her boss's shoulder in a friendly manner. United by the strong friendship, the two prepare to face the major dangers that will come ahead. She recalls his plan to hunt down the bad until the world changes, thinking that that is a great madness. But suddenly, she stops walking for a moment upon perceiving that something attracts her to that idea. She turns her face slowly, feeling that that madness might be the only salvation for her people. She thinks that the first young master, Yeon So-hyun, is perhaps the only one capable of performing this feat back to the present. The main base of the Hyukgul Guild is suddenly invaded by the clan ninjas. The brute warriors of the Hyukgul gang advance fiercely against the unexpected invaders. The bald brute rants furiously, cursing the ninjas with every possible name. He yells irritated that anyone now thinks they can invade and attack their territory that way. The leader shouts, demanding to know what his stupid warriors are waiting for to counterattack. The hefty thugs run fiercely with their weapons in hand to initiate the bloody combat. One of the invading ninjas draws his sword in an agile manner, prepared to return the attack. The blades clash with violence and sparks fly, while the two sides fight fiercely in the courtyard. The ninja applies an extremely swift, lethal blow, tearing out a lot of blood and leaving the rival in shock. The brute leader widens his eyes in panic before the immense speed of the adversaries. Without giving any chance of defense, the masked warrior slices the enemy with a precise strike. The infiltrator lands a well-aimed lethal strike, ramming his blade directly into the enemy gangster's chest. The thugs begin to be massacred one by one in the base courtyard, shouting in terror and begging for clemency. Another brute warrior is struck with extreme violence by the masked assassin's lethal onslaught. The leader shouts, desperate for the men to open space on the sides for the arrival of the warriors from the back, the roof. Guards watch closely while a new line of enemies begins to move quickly. Suddenly, a numerous battalion of the gang's spearmen advances with their weapons in hand to the combat. The informant warns the pavilion mistress in a panic tone that an entire line of spearmen has just appeared. She perceives that they brought the spearmen and that they even emptied the base's internal defense to fight. The mistress orders that they send all reserves immediately, letting the commanders act on their own. She snorts with disdain upon noticing that they indeed sent even the personal guard that protected the temple. Gyu expresses concern, alerting that using all reserves will leave them exposed if hidden mercenaries appear. The bodyguard questions if anyone would really dare attack knowing that Gyumju has the Sword Clan's protection. The older one gives an enigmatic smile, preparing to reveal a very important detail to her faithful friend. She confesses that, in reality, she has already assumed all responsibility for that risky and dangerous onslaught. She asks what the problem is with risking everything, especially since now they have the sovereign of the dark heaven at their side. She says that if he is half of what the rumors say, they only need to enjoy the moment at his side. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion shakes the main building, destroying part of the structure. With the violent impact of the shockwave, a silhouette is hurled through the air amidst the debris. The pavilion mistress widens her only eye in complete shock before the sudden and devastating attack. She asks herself in desperation what is happening while the fire consumes part of the grand temple. A hand holds the mistress quickly in the air at the same time that Gyu shouts, desperate to save her from the fall. Gyu carries her with agility in her arms, landing in a safe manner on the ground amidst the dense black smoke. The bodyguard asks anxiously if she is fine, while the older one merely groans in pain because of the impact. She tries to focus her vision in the dust, asking herself what could have caused that sudden destruction. They observe horrified that the grand structure of the main building was completely imploded in flames. Suddenly, a hysterical and sickly laughter echoes from the smoke, startling the two surviving warriors. The pavilion mistress goes pale and stammers without managing to believe the monstrous figure before her. The terrible Gyumju emerges with a frightening demonic appearance, displaying a bizarre claw and glowing eyes. The fire continues spreading swiftly through the temple's wooden beams, threatening to collapse the ceiling. Enormous pieces of burning debris fall from above, destroying the tables and the furniture of the ruined hall. The two try to dodge the incandescent rubble falling everywhere with extreme speed. She faces the transformed villain in shock, unable to comprehend the origin of such bizarreness. The villain's gigantic red claw creaks in a bizarre manner. While she stretches it in a threatening way, Gyumju projects herself forward in a fierce attack, enveloped in an extremely violent yellow energy. The villain laughs in an uncontrolled and frightening manner. With her body totally taken by the ritual's malignant energy, Gyu assumes a defensive stance on the spot, asking herself how the enemy leader ended up getting that way. With cracked skin and a sinister smile, Gyumju yells the pavilion leader's title in a mocking manner. She leaps in the direction of the two with her extended claw, shouting for them to end by her hands right there. The mistress tries to react to the imminent blow, but the villain's absurd speed prevents her from dodging in time. In a fraction of a second, Gyu throws herself in front to push her, yelling desperate to save her from the blow. With a quick push, she manages to clear her lady from that monstrous claw's collision path. The bodyguard implores, shouting for her to flee from that place as fast as possible to survive, fallen on the floor. The pavilion mistress shouts, desperate for her faithful companion's name amidst the dust. She grinds her teeth with fury and helplessness upon seeing her best friend running such great danger because of her. With no other choice, she begins to run out of there, while shouting with her heart in her hand for Gyu to survive desperate. She wonders where on earth the first young master and that venerable of the dark heaven are at this moment. One more large part of the building's ceiling collapses with a terrible crash, scattering fire across the whole courtyard. Gyeomju makes a click with her tongue and disdains the leader's flight, focusing her attention on the remaining opponent. She mocks the cowardly attitude of fleeing like a fool and prepares to give the final strike on her cornered prey. However, a familiar silhouette emerges from the shadows, blocking the path, and warns that her true opponent has arrived. Gyeomju shouts, enraged at the opponent, ordering her to get out of her way immediately. The villain threatens that she will finish her right there, case she refuses to back away and give passage. With firmness, Gyu says she possesses her warrior pride and that she won't be defeated so easily. At this moment, the concept emerges regarding the mystical barrier that all warriors call the wall. It is explained that as martial artists evolve, they arrive at a point where progress slows down and they face a wall. People say that the few who overcome this barrier gain a power so immense that they become totally different people. Because of this incredible evolution, those who overcome the wall are called by everyone true masters back to the terrible battle. A swift succession of red energy strikes cuts the air. Gyu analyzes shocked the immense strength that Gyeomju is displaying right in front of her in that combat. She perceives that that power is much superior to hers, since she herself barely managed to reach that wall. Gyu comprehends startled that the criminal leader is clearly a master who has already overcome this mystical barrier. Gyeomju's gigantic demonic claw collides with brutal force against Gyu's black sword. The gazes of the two cross. Amidst the weapon's violent collision and the energy's impact, the villain's monstrous claw projects again in an extremely swift and dangerous movement. Gyu leaps back in an agile manner to dodge the blast of destructive cuts that tears the scenario. The bodyguard widens her eyes, confused, perceiving something very bizarre in her opponent's arm. She asks herself, horrified, how Gyeomju manages to multiply and stretch her arms in that macabre way. One of the red energy strikes hits the ground with a devastating impact that scatters debris. Gyeomju mocks, laughing in a hysterical manner, asking if she really thought she could fight with that pathetic strength. She conjures an immense sequence of red energy palms that advance like a lethal wall. Gyu tries to defend herself using her sword, but the overwhelming amount of attacks corners her with no mercy. The violent impact throws the bodyguard with force against the courtyard floor, breaking the tiles. Without losing time, the villain emerges, hovering over her with raised claw and a sadistic smile on her face. Gyu feels panic dominate her body upon perceiving she is about to receive the final blow. Gyeomju roars, telling the plague to get out of her way, while she brings down her immense destructive claw. A massive explosion of red energy and dust raises from the ground with the final attack's impact. Gyu uses the rest of her strength to try cushioning the damage, but ends up thrown far away. She falls to her knees, spitting blood, quite injured and with the wall behind totally cracked. Gyeomju walks slowly amidst the smoke, displaying her monstrous foot with sharp nails. The villain hovers threateningly before the helpless guard, savoring her imminent and easy victory. She amuses herself upon seeing that the opponent survived the brutal strike, displaying a smile full of fury. She praises mockingly the guard's resistance, who can only gasp from fatigue and pain. Gyu perceives that she almost ended and that the repeated use of her technique exhausted all her internal energy. She fears not managing to endure one more strike, remembering that the rival fought empty-handed the whole time. The remembrance of the gigantic and destructive red palms fills the warrior's mind with despair. She asks herself, horrified, what on earth could have happened to that woman's body to change so much? Without the slightest drop of pity, the villain prepares her mystical claw to deliver the fatal attack. She raises the demonic arm in the direction of the kneeling opponent, ready to finish her life. Irritated by the silence and the adversary's defying look, Gyeomju rants with disdain. She yells that the guard is an insolent girl for not demonstrating proper dread before the end. Gyeomju delivers the final strike with her immense claw. Enveloped in a whirlpool of pure red energy, Gyu feels the villain's terrible and suffocating murderous intent crush any chance of reaction. The blonde challenges mockingly, telling the adversary to try blocking that immense power as well. The massive cut descends with absurd speed, promising to slice everything that lies in the path. The warrior closes her eyes and accepts her tragic destiny, thinking that she will surely end right there. However, a gigantic metal gauntlet emerges out of nowhere and blocks the lethal strike with ease. The young Jung-ah reveals herself then, delivering a powerful onslaught with her immense armored fist. Gyu opens her eyes in complete shock upon perceiving she was saved at the very last second by an unexpected ally. She observes the young woman with tied hair and immense gauntlet, asking herself who in the world that girl could be. Jung-ah merely gives a friendly and confident smile, ready to show the power of her iron fists. She asks smilingly if she took too long to arrive, announcing that the reinforcements have finally arrived. Suddenly, another allied warrior lands all of a sudden, delivering a swift strike that startles the masked guard. The man lands in a firm manner amidst the rubble, making a joke with his ostentatious arrival. Yunga nods happily, saying she is fine, and proudly confirms that they are the mission's reinforcements. The muscular ally assumes the front, wielding his heavy saber, and warns young Yunga to take care. He observes the leader Gyumju and seriously admits that she is an extremely formidable adversary. The man fears they won't leave alive from there, but Yunga encourages him, saying they will win if they fight well together. Gyu finds it impossible for just the three to win and questions anxiously if there is no other reinforcement coming. Yunga makes a grimace and clumsily confesses that, for now, they are indeed the only ones there. The three warriors align themselves before the terrible threat in flames. Preparing their respective defenses, Gyu supports her injured hand on the ground firmly, refusing to give up on that desperate fight. Seeing their determination, she decides that there is no other choice but to fight with all strengths. The trio faces Gyumju amidst the whirlpool of red energy and ashes that consumes the whole courtyard. The villain mocks, asking if they finished the conversation, and challenges them to attack all together like insects. The sky of Luoyang remains tinged a deep red, while the final battle reaches its peak. In the surroundings of the main base, the violent confrontation between the two rival groups continues at full steam. The pavilion mistress stops running for an instant and looks back anguished with Gyu's situation. She lets out a groan of pure anguish upon seeing the black smoke rise higher and higher from the temple in flames. She asks, desperate, if there are really no more reinforcements, and the man confirms that there is nobody available. She grinds her teeth from frustration and curtly orders that squad number 3 move right now. An injured warrior shouts, desperate, that casualties are heavy and that they need to retreat immediately. Other combatants look anxiously around, reporting that Squad 17 is asking for support. Hearing that even Squad 10 is beating a retreat, she enters a panic because that makes no sense. The chaos and the combatants' cries of agony take over the whole territory around the base. Pieces of burning wood continue plummeting from the ceiling, transforming the courtyard into a true underworld. The few surviving warriors try to block the brutal attacks of the enemy sect thugs. The ninja gets astonished by the monstrous and relentless force that the enemy gangsters are displaying. One of the red-eyed enemies is stabbed in the belly, but continues advancing, laughing and without feeling pain. The ninja cannot believe that the opponent took a sword slash to the stomach and didn't even sketch a reaction. Suddenly, the muscular ally leaps, delivering a violent flying kick directly into the gangster's chest. He takes advantage of the opening to deliver a well-aimed cut and decapitate the bloody monster. The brute's body falls lifeless onto the courtyard floor, finally ending that bizarre threat. However, another gangster emerges from the flames, delivering a swift strike against the surviving allies. The blades clash again amidst the sparks and the black smoke that consumes the base's whole courtyard. One of the masked warriors retreats, panting and injured, with his arm bleeding a lot after the collision. He laments tiredly, thinking that it seems real monsters are on the loose, destroying everything over there. He observes the devastated and bloody scenario around him with an expression of pure mystical horror. He whispers tremblingly that courtyard in flames transformed into the very mystical underworld on Earth. Back to the main fight, Gyumju mocks the two, asking with disdain if that is really all they have. She laughs in a cruel and hysterical manner, saying she thought the adversaries would endure fighting for longer. Yunga rants tiredly, while Gyu silently prepares to try her final attack. Suddenly, the green mystical stone embedded in Junga's immense gauntlet begins to glow intensely. However, the effort drains her energies and the young woman spits blood, extremely worn out by the fight. Gyumju bursts out laughing with sadism, mocking that seeing the weak fall and suffer is always very funny. She promises that soon she will send their young master to the underworld as well, so they don't stay alone. The two merely face the villain in a serious and helpless manner. Knowing that the chances of victory vanished, Gyu thinks in silence about her pavilion lady, praying for her to manage to flee from that chaos in safety. She asks herself with her heart in her hand if her lady managed to indeed escape safe and sound from that inferno. Gyu squeezes with all the remaining force the handle of her sword, preparing for the fight's final clash. She gives a confident smile beneath the mask, decided to fight bravely, even knowing there are no chances of victory. She raises her gaze with a lot of grit, guaranteeing firmly that even so she won't back down under any hypothesis. Gyumju tires of conversation and prepares the final blow to send her straight to the beyond to wait for her master. The villain projects her destructive energy in the direction of Gyu, who barely manages to move to dodge the strike. Gyu closes her eyes before that crushing red glow, awaiting the worst to happen right there. However, suddenly, an absurdly colossal and divine presence makes her whisper in complete shock. Even the pavilion mistress, distant from there, stops running suddenly upon feeling the drastic change in the atmosphere. She extends her hand without understanding anything, with the whole scenario around her assuming a dark and cold shade. A drop of cold sweat runs down her face while she tries to comprehend what is happening there. The enemy sect gangsters also paralyze confused, commenting startled that the world simply darkened. She embraces her own body, trembling with cold, feeling a brutal and inexplicable temperature drop in the air. A frosty mist comes out of her mouth as the night's mystical darkness seems to swallow the base's whole territory. The strikes and combats are interrupted at the exact same instant, with the warriors freezing out of dread in place. All the battlefield's violence yields space to an absolute and extremely chilling silence. Absolutely everyone there can feel the approach of a force that goes beyond human comprehension. It is the true and feared arrival of the mystical eternal night that covers the whole gigantic enemy base. And right in the middle of that absolute and suffocating pitch black, something spectacular finally happens before everyone. The legendary white mask emerges glowing in the dark, silently mocking the rules of the entire world. A mystical and imposing voice echoes from the shadows, asking with irony if they were waiting for him. The pavilion informant widens her eyes and stammers in complete shock upon recognizing that presence. He emerges imposing, placing his white mask. The terrible reaper and sovereign of the dark heaven is back.